My son and his wife went on a 7-day cruise, leaving me to babysit my 9-year-old grandson who was born mute. When the front door shut, he looked at me and said in a perfect voice, "Grandpa, do not drink the tea Mom made. She plotted to kill you." My blood ran cold, but the real horror started 30 seconds later when our family dog licked the spill on the floor and dropped dead. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect yourself from the very people you raised. I stood there in the hallway of my own home holding the handle of my cane so tight my knuckles turned ash gray. The silence in the house was heavy, almost suffocating. Just moments ago, the foyer had been filled with the chaotic energy of departure. My son Terrence was checking his pockets for passports for the third time while his wife Courtney adjusted her wide-brimmed sun hat looking at herself in the hallway mirror. "Have a great week, Dad," Courtney had said, turning to me with that smile of hers. It was a smile that never quite reached her eyes, a smile that showed too many teeth. "We left plenty of food in the fridge and, oh, I made you a special cup of herbal tea. It is on the coffee table. Drink it while it is hot. It is great for your circulation." Terrence had avoided my gaze. He was 35 years old, but in that moment he looked like a child who had broken a window and was trying to hide the baseball bat. He mumbled a quick goodbye, gave me a weak pat on the shoulder, and hurried out to the Uber that was waiting to take them to the airport. They were flying to Miami to catch a luxury cruise to the Bahamas. An anniversary gift, they said. A week of relaxation. I watched through the window as the car drove away, disappearing down the tree-lined street of this Atlanta suburb. I felt a pang of loneliness, not because they were leaving, but because I felt like an intruder in the house I had paid for. They thought I was just a retired dock worker living off a meager pension and their charity. They did not know the truth about me. They did not know that I, Jeremiah Banks, was the silent owner of one of the largest logistics warehouse chains on the East Coast. I had spent a lifetime building an empire in the shadows, keeping my wealth hidden to teach my son the value of hard work. A lesson he apparently never learned. I turned back to the living room. My grandson Leo was sitting on the floor playing with a red toy truck. Leo was 9. He had never spoken a single word in his life. The doctors said he was on the spectrum, that he was developmentally delayed. Courtney often complained about the burden of raising a special needs child in front of him as if he were a piece of furniture that could not hear or feel. I sighed, feeling the weight of my 70 years in my knees. I walked over to the coffee table. The tea Courtney had prepared was there in my favorite ceramic mug, steaming gently. It smelled of peppermint and something else, something sweet and cloying underneath the mint. "I need to sit down," I muttered to myself, reaching for the mug. My old heart was tired. Maybe Courtney was right. Maybe this tea would help. I lifted the mug to my lips. The steam warmed my face. Suddenly there was a blur of motion. Leo did not move like a child who was slow or unaware. He moved with the precision of a striking cobra. He launched himself from the carpet and slapped the mug out of my hand. The ceramic shattered against the hardwood floor. The dark liquid splashed across the expensive rug and pooled near the leg of the sofa. I stared at the mess, shocked. Leo, what on earth? Then he looked up. His eyes, usually cast down or vacant, were sharp, clear, and terrifyingly intelligent. He stood up straight, his posture shifting from that of a slumped child to someone much older. "Grandpa, do not drink that." The voice was not a mumble. It was not the guttural sound of a child learning to speak. It was clear, crisp, and articulate. It was the voice of a boy who had been listening and learning in silence for 9 years. I froze. I gripped my cane for support because the room suddenly felt like it was spinning. "Leo, you spoke." "Mom put bleach and antifreeze in the tea," Leo said, pointing at the puddle. "She told Dad that if the old man dies this week, the house is finally ours. She said it needs to look like a heart attack." I tried to process his words, but my brain refused. This was my son, my daughter-in-law. They were greedy, yes. They were lazy, sure. But murderers. "Leo, you should not make up stories," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I am not making up stories," Grandpa Leo said, his face grim. "Watch." Our dog Buster, a golden retriever mix who had been with me for 12 years, trotted into the room. He must have heard the commotion. Before I could stop him, before I could even process what was happening, Buster lowered his head to the puddle of tea on the floor. "Buster, no!" I shouted, but the old dog had already taken 2 or 3 large laps of the liquid. He looked up at me, wagging his tail, and then he stopped. A whine escaped his throat, a sound of pure confusion and pain. Buster hacked. His legs stiffened. He fell onto his side, his body seizing violently. Foam, white and pink with blood, began to bubble from his mouth. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the pain in my joints. I reached for him, but there was nothing I could do. The convulsions lasted less than 30 seconds. Then with one final shudder, my faithful companion let out a long breath and went still. His eyes stared unseeing at the ceiling. The silence that followed was absolute. I knelt there on the floor, my hand resting on the still, warm flank of my dog. The smell of peppermint and death hung in the air. If I had taken one sip, just one sip. I looked up at Leo. The boy was crying now, silent tears rolling down his cheeks, but he did not make a sound. He looked terrified, not of the dog, but of what he had just revealed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "She said she would kill you if I talked," Leo whispered. "She said she would cut my tongue out. She hurts me, Grandpa. When Dad isn't home, she hurts me." I pulled my grandson into my arms. I hugged him tighter than I had ever hugged anyone. I felt his small body shaking against mine. Rage, hot and blinding, began to rise in my chest. It started in my gut and spread like fire through my veins, burning away the shock, burning away the grief, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. They killed my dog. They tried to kill me. They tortured my grandson. I stood up. I was not Jeremiah, the retired old man, anymore. I was Big J, the man who had run the toughest docks in Atlanta, the man who had negotiated with union bosses and sharks and always came out on top. I picked up the shattered pieces of the mug with a napkin, being careful not to touch the liquid. I went to the kitchen and found a small glass jar. I used a spoon to scrape up some of the liquid from the floor, putting it into the jar and sealing it tight. This was evidence. Then I went back to the living room. I looked at Buster's body. I would have to bury him. I would not let him rot there while my murderers sipped cocktails on a cruise ship. "Leo, go pack a bag," I said, my voice steady. "Put your favorite toys in it. We are not staying here tonight." "Where are we going?" Grandpa Leo asked. "We are going to verify some things," I said. "And then we are going to war." I carried Buster's body out to the backyard. I grabbed the shovel from the shed. The ground was hard, but I didn't feel the fatigue. Every time the shovel hit the dirt, I pictured Courtney's fake smile. Every time I tossed the earth, I pictured Terrence's cowardly eyes, my son, my own flesh and blood. He stood there and watched her make that tea. He knew. He probably bought the poison. I finished burying Buster under the old oak tree where he liked to sleep in the summer. I said a short prayer, not for the dog, but for the soul of my son, because God knows I was about to destroy his life on earth. I walked back into the house and washed my hands. I scrubbed them until they were red. Then I took my phone from my pocket. I did not dial 911. The police would take too long. They would ask too many questions. They would freeze the crime scene, and Terrence and Courtney might get wind of it and flee or lawyer up before I was ready. No, I needed to trap them. I dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Alistair Wright answered on the second ring. Alistair was my personal attorney and the only man who knew the full extent of my empire. He was ruthless, brilliant, and loyal only to the checkbook I held. Jeremiah Alistair's smooth voice came through. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Shut up and listen, Alistair," I said. "I need you to open a file. Attempted murder." There was a pause on the line. The playful tone vanished. Who Jeremiah? Terrence and Courtney. They just tried to poison me with antifreeze. They killed my dog. Jesus Christ, Alistair breathed. "Are you okay? Do you need an ambulance? I am alive, thanks to Leo." "But Alistair, listen to me carefully. Do not freeze their accounts yet. Do not call the cops yet. What do you want to do, Jeremiah?" "I want to hunt," I said, looking at the spot on the floor where my dog died. "They think I am a helpless old man with a small pension and a house they can sell. They think they are smart. I want you to hire a private investigator. I want to know everything they have done in the last 5 years. Every credit card swipe, every text message, every debt. I want to know who Terrence owes money to. And Alistair, I want to buy his debt." "You want to become your son's loan shark?" Alistair asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to own him," I replied. "I want to own the air they breathe before I crush them." "Consider it done," Alistair said. "Where are you going?" "I am taking Leo. We are going to the safe house. And Alistair, get a lab to analyze this sample I have. I want undeniable proof." I hung up the phone. Leo was standing by the door with his backpack. He looked at me with those old, knowing eyes. "Are we safe, Grandpa?" he asked. "You are safe, Leo," I promised him. But they are not. I took one last look at the house. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a battlefield. And Terrence and Courtney had just made the biggest mistake of their miserable lives. They thought they were killing a sheep, but they just woke up a lion. "Come on, Leo," I said, opening the door. "Let's go see what else your mother has been hiding." As we walked to my old truck parked in the driveway, I realized something. I had spent my whole life building a legacy for my son. I had worked doubles, saved, invested, and built a fortune so he would never have to struggle like I did. And his repayment was a cup of poison. I started the engine. The truck rumbled to life. If they wanted my money, they were going to get it. But not in the way they expected. They were going to get the full weight of my power, and when I was done with them, they would wish they had drunk that tea themselves. We drove away, leaving the empty house behind. The game had begun. And unlike them, I wasn't playing for money. I was playing for justice. I walked into the kitchen and found a clean mason jar in the back of the cupboard. My hands were steady. They had to be. I was not a grieving pet owner right now. I was a crime scene investigator in my own home. I returned to the living room where the puddle of tea still glistened on the hardwood floor. It looked innocent enough. It looked like a simple spill that could be wiped up with a paper towel. But the dead body of my dog in the backyard told a different story. I carefully spooned the liquid into the jar. The smell hit me again. Peppermint masking the sweet chemical scent of ethylene glycol. Antifreeze. It was a clumsy choice. A stupid choice. But Courtney was arrogant. She thought I was just an old man with failing senses. She did not think I would notice the difference between mint tea and a chemical cocktail designed to shut down my kidneys. I sealed the jar tight and wrapped it in 3 layers of plastic bags before placing it in my backpack. This was my leverage. This was the bullet in the gun I was about to point at them. Next came the cleanup. I could not leave the stain there. If they came back early, or if they had someone checking on the house, they would see the mess and get suspicious. I grabbed a bucket of hot water and bleach. I scrubbed that section of the floor until the varnish began to fade. I needed it to look like I had simply been overzealous with cleaning. I needed to erase the physical evidence of the murder attempt so they would walk into my trap feeling safe. As I scrubbed, I thought about Terrence, my son. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike on this very street. I remembered paying for his first car. I remembered bailing him out of trouble in college. Every scrub of the brush was erasing those memories, replacing them with the image of him standing by the door, watching his wife hand me a cup of death. He was weak. I had raised a weak man, and that was perhaps my greatest sin. But weakness was no excuse for patricide. I stood up and surveyed the room. It was clean. The air smelled of bleach now. The only thing missing was Buster. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down. There was no time for tears. I looked at the clock. We had been alone for less than an hour. The game was just beginning. I turned to Leo. He was sitting on the sofa watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. For 9 years I had looked at this boy and seen a tragedy. A child trapped in his own mind. A boy who needed speech therapy and special schools. I had paid for all of them. I had spent thousands on specialists who told me he was cognitively delayed. They were all wrong. "Leo," I said, sitting down next to him, "we need to talk." The boy nodded. His posture was upright. His eyes were focused. The vacancy I was used to seeing was gone completely, replaced by a sharp, alert intelligence. "You speak perfectly," I said quietly. "Why have you never said a word to me? Why did you let me believe you were sick?" Leo looked down at his hands. They were small hands, but they were not trembling. He looked like a soldier who had been behind enemy lines for too long. "It was the only way to be safe," Grandpa Leo said. His voice was soft but steady. "Safe from who?" "From Mom," Leo replied. He looked up at me, and the pain in his eyes broke my heart. "When Dad is at work, she changes. She is not nice like she pretends to be. She screams. She throws things." "What does she do to you, Leo?" "She pinches me. Hard. Under my arms where no one can see. She tells me I'm a burden. She tells me I'm stupid. But the worst things are what she says about you." My blood ran cold. "What does she say about me?" Leo took a deep breath. "She calls us names, bad names. She says you are just a dirty old monkey who got lucky with money. She says I am a mongrel because I am mixed. She told me when I was 4 years old that if I ever told Dad or you how she talks, she would put rat poison in your food. She said she would kill you and it would be my fault. I felt the room tilt. This was not just greed. This was hate. Pure, unadulterated racism living under my roof, eating at my table. My son had married a woman who despised the very blood in his veins, and he was too blind or too cowardly to see it. "So you stopped talking," I whispered. "I figured if I was mute she would think I was stupid," Leo explained. "She stopped hiding things from me. She talks on the phone in front of me. She talks to her friends. She plans things. She thinks I am just a piece of furniture. Selective mutism." He had chosen silence as a shield. He had sacrificed his childhood, his voice, his connection with the world just to keep me alive. He was 9 years old, and he had been carrying the weight of a grown man's terror. "Come here," I said. Leo moved into my arms and I held him. I felt the tension in his small frame. I realized then that I was not just saving myself, I was liberating a hostage. "She is never going to hurt you again," I promised him. "I swear to you, Leo, she will never touch you again." Leo pulled back and looked at me. "Grandpa, there is more. You need to see what is under their bed." "Under the bed?" "Yes, she keeps a suitcase there. She calls it her escape plan." I grabbed my cane. "Show me." We walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. This was the room I had given them when they moved in to save money. I had moved into the guest room. I thought I was being generous. Now I realized I had just given the enemy a command center. The room smelled of Courtney's expensive floral perfume. It used to smell pleasant to me. Now it smelled like deceit. Leo pointed to the king-size bed. "Under there." I got down on my hands and knees. My joints popped in protest, but adrenaline was a powerful painkiller. I reached into the darkness and my hand brushed against cold leather. I pulled. It was a large black suitcase, heavy and locked. "Do you know the code?" I asked Leo. 1988, Leo said instantly. "Mom's birth year." I rolled the tumblers. Click. The latches popped open. I lifted the lid and what I saw made my breath catch in my throat. It was not clothes, it was paperwork. Stacks and stacks of paperwork organized with a meticulousness that was terrifying. I sat back on my heels and began to go through them. The first stack was financial, but it was not savings, it was debt. There were letters from 3 different casinos in Atlantic City and Las Vegas, final notices, threats of legal action. Terrence's name was on all of them. I did the math quickly in my head. 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. My son was not just bad with money. He was a degenerate gambler. He was drowning. Then I found the other notes. These were handwritten, scrawled on napkins and scraps of paper. They were IOUs, but not to banks, to names like Rico and Big Sal. The interest rates listed were criminal. $500,000. My son owed $500,000 to loan sharks. That explained the desperation. That explained why he needed the house. He was not trying to build a future. He was trying to keep his kneecaps. I pushed the debt aside and dug deeper. The next folder was blue. I opened it and felt a wave of nausea. It was a divorce petition. Fully drafted, dated for next month. Courtney was planning to leave him. I read the terms. She was asking for everything: alimony, child support, full custody of Leo on the grounds that Terrence was an unstable addict. She had been documenting his gambling losses. She had been building a case against him while smiling in his face. She was going to wait until I died, wait until the house and the insurance money transferred to Terrence, and then she was going to divorce him and take half of everything, leaving him with the debt and nothing else. She was going to bleed us both dry. But the final document at the bottom of the suitcase was the one that made me want to burn the house down. It was a life insurance policy. My name was at the top. Jeremiah Banks. The policy amount was $2 million. I scanned the pages. The beneficiary was Terrence. But there was a clause that assigned administration of the funds to Courtney in the event of Terrence's incapacity. I turned to the last page. There above the line marked signature of insured was my name. It was a good forgery. A very good forgery. But I knew my own hand. The loop on the J was slightly too wide. The slant was a degree off. I checked the date. 2 weeks ago. They had taken out a $2 million policy on my life, forged my signature, and paid the premium with my own stolen credit card information, which I found attached to the file. They had bet on my death. They had turned my life into a lottery ticket. I looked at Leo, who was standing by the door watching me. "She said we would be rich," Leo said quietly. "She told her friend on the phone that once the old man kicks the bucket, she is going to put Dad in rehab and put me in a home for special kids. She said she is going to move to Paris. A home. She was going to institutionalize him. She was going to throw away her own son like garbage once she had the cash. I closed the suitcase. I did not lock it. I did not put it back. I stood up holding the handle. This was coming with us. I looked around the bedroom one last time. I saw the wedding photo on the dresser, Terrence and Courtney smiling, cutting the cake. I had paid for that cake. I had paid for that dress. I had paid for the ring on her finger. Every smile in that photo was a lie. Every moment of the last 10 years had been a long con. I took out my phone. I took photos of the open suitcase. I took photos of the policy, the divorce papers, the gambling debts. I uploaded them immediately to my secure cloud server. Then I sent them to Alistair. I texted him 3 words. I have them. I looked at Leo. Grab your bag, son. We are leaving. Where, Grandpa? To the only place where money cannot buy you safety, I said. We are going to the truth. I walked out of that house with the suitcase in one hand and my grandson's hand in the other. I left the front door unlocked. Let the neighbors see. Let the world see. I didn't care anymore about appearances. The Jeremiah Banks who tried to be a gentle retired father died the moment that dog hit the floor. The man who walked out of that door was the man who had built an empire from dirt, and he was ready to burn his enemies to the ground. As I started the truck, I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. It had been less than 2 hours since they left for their cruise. They were probably just boarding the ship now, clinking champagne glasses, toasting to my death. Enjoy your drink, Courtney, I whispered to the empty cab, because it is going to be the most expensive drink you ever had. I pulled out of the driveway and I did not look back. The hunt was on. The phone in my pocket vibrated against my leg like a warning shot. It was a text message from Alistair. I did not want to look at it, but I had to. I pulled the device out and stared at the screen. The message was short, clinical, and devastating. The lab results were in. The liquid I had scraped off the floor was 95% ethylene glycol mixed with a concentrated sweetener and a dash of peppermint oil. It was industrial-grade antifreeze. The lab report noted that a single cup contained enough toxicity to shut down the kidneys of a grown man within 48 hours. Death would be slow, agonizing, and look exactly like natural organ failure to an untrained coroner. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The undeniable proof. They had not just tried to make me sick. They had tried to erase me. I looked around the kitchen, the space where I had cooked breakfast for Terrence for 20 years. It felt alien now. It felt like a trap. Then I saw it. It was a tiny glint of light high up on the bookshelf in the living room, tucked between 2 old encyclopedias. A small green LED pulsed once every 10 seconds. To anyone else, it would look like a reflection of the sun, but I knew better. I had spent 40 years in logistics, securing warehouses against thieves and corporate spies. I knew surveillance when I saw it. Courtney had installed a camera. She wanted to watch. She wanted a front row seat to my death. I looked at Leo. He was sitting on the floor, sorting his Legos by color, his face a mask of concentration. He knew about the camera, too. He had positioned himself with his back to it, playing the part of the oblivious, mute child perfectly. He was smarter than all of them combined. We have to put on a show. Leo, I whispered, not looking at the bookshelf. She is watching. Leo did not turn around. He just gave a barely perceptible nod. I went to the bathroom and found an old bottle of calamine lotion and some baby powder. I mixed them in my palm, creating a paste that looked like sickness. I smeared it under my eyes and across my cheeks. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back was gray ashen and looked like he had 1 foot in the grave. It was a disguise I had used once before back in the 80s when I needed a union boss to think I was too weak to fight so he would lower his guard. It worked then, and it would work now. I shuffled back into the living room, dragging my left leg slightly. I let my shoulders slump. I collapsed onto the sofa directly in the frame of the hidden camera. I groaned loudly, clutching my stomach. Leo looked up at me. His eyes were worried, but he stayed in character. He offered me a red Lego brick, a silent offering of comfort. Just then, the tablet on the coffee table began to ring. The screen lit up with a video call request. The caller ID said Courtney and Terrence. They were calling to check their handiwork. I let it ring 3 times, 4 times. I needed them to think I was slow weak. Finally, I reached out with a trembling hand and tapped the green button. The the screen filled with the bright blue of the ocean and the blinding white of a cruise ship deck. Courtney's face appeared centered in the frame. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked like a movie star. Terrence was behind her, looking pale and sweaty. He was not made for the sea or for murder. "Hi, Dad." Courtney chirped, her voice too loud, too cheerful. "We just wanted to check in. We are having such a wonderful time, but we missed you. Did you drink the tea I left for you?" I coughed, a dry, hacking sound that rattled in my chest. I brought the tablet closer to my face so she could see the gray pallor of my skin. I drank it. I rasped, my voice weak. "But Courtney, I do not feel so good. My stomach is turning. I feel dizzy." Courtney's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but then it widened. It was a predator's smile. "Oh no, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "It is probably just a little stomach bug, or maybe the heat. You know how you get in this weather. Did you finish the whole cup?" Every drop I lied. I thought it would help my heart, but my chest hurts, Courtney. It burns. "Good," she said instinctively before catching herself. "I mean good that you drank it because the herbs need time to work. The burning means it is flushing out the toxins, Dad. You just need to rest. Do not call a doctor yet. They will just charge you a fortune for nothing. Just lie down and sleep." Terrence looked away. He could not even look at me through a screen. He was looking at the ocean, probably wishing he could jump in. "Son," I called out to him. "Terrence, are you there?" Terrence flinched. "Yeah, Dad. I am here. I just wanted to tell you." I wheezed, clutching my chest dramatically. "I love you, son. Even if I do not make it to next week, I want you to know I tried my best." Terrence looked like he was about to vomit. Courtney elbowed him hard in the ribs. "Don't talk like that, Dad," Courtney interjected. "You are going to be fine. Just sleep. We will call you tomorrow." I let my hand drop. The tablet clattered onto the coffee table. I let my eyes roll back slightly, and then I let my body go limp, sliding sideways on the sofa. I lay there perfectly still, my mouth open, my breathing shallow. From their perspective, it looked like I had passed out, or worse. I waited. 1 second. 5 seconds. Did he hang up? I heard Courtney's voice, tinny and sharp, coming from the tablet speakers. I kept my eyes closed, but my ears were straining. I had not hung up. The tablet was lying at an angle facing the ceiling, but the microphone was still active. "I think he passed out," Terrence whispered. His voice was shaking. "Oh, God. Courtney. He looks like a corpse." "Shut up, Terrence," Courtney hissed. "This is perfect. Did you see his face?" "He is already gray." The dosage was spot on. "What if he dies right now?" Terrence asked. "Who is going to find him?" "No one," Courtney said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "That is the beauty of it. The mute kid won't call 911 because he doesn't know how to use a phone. By the time the neighbor checks on them in 2 days, he will be cold, and the autopsy will just show kidney failure from old age. We are in the clear. 2 days. They had calculated the timeline perfectly. They knew my neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, only came by on Wednesdays to drop off mail. "I feel sick," Terrence said. "He is my father, Courtney." "He is a paycheck," Courtney snapped. "Stop being a baby. Do you want Rico to break your legs? Do you want to lose the house?" This was the only way. "Now pour me a drink. We need to celebrate. In 48 hours, we are going to be millionaires." I heard the clinking of glass. I heard the pop of a cork. They were toasting. They were celebrating my murder while the sun beat down on their faces in the middle of the ocean. I lay there for another minute just to be safe. Then I heard the connection click off. The screen went black. I opened my eyes. The gray makeup on my face felt tight and itchy. I sat up slowly. The act was over. The rage, however, was just beginning. It sat in my gut, heavy and cold like a stone. Leo was staring at me, his eyes wide. "They think you are dying, Grandpa," he said. "They are wrong," I replied, standing up and wiping the powder from my face. "They are the ones who are dead walking. They just don't know it yet." I went to the wall where the hidden camera was. I stared directly into the lens. I knew it wasn't transmitting live audio, but it was recording. I wanted them to see this later. I wanted them to see the moment the old man they thought was helpless turned into their executioner. I winked at the camera, then I reached up and pulled the encyclopedia loose, covering the lens. "Leo, get the toolbox," I said. While Leo ran to the garage, I went to the basement. There was a wine cellar down there behind a rack of dusty bottles that I had collected over 30 years. But the wine was just a distraction. I pushed the third rack to the left. It swung open on silent oiled hinges, revealing a heavy steel door. Terrence thought the house was the asset. He thought the insurance money was the prize. He had no idea what I had built underneath his feet. I spun the dial on the safe door. Left, right, left. It clicked open. Inside, stacked floor to ceiling, were the real fruits of my labor. Gold bars, stacks of cash in vacuum-sealed bags, deeds to commercial properties across 3 states. This was the emergency fund. This was the capital I kept off the books from the days when banks wouldn't lend to a black man with a dream in a warehouse. I grabbed 2 duffel bags from the shelf. I began filling them with cash. 50,000, 100,000. I took a stack of gold coins. I took the deeds. I was moving the assets. By the time Courtney and Terrence came back to claim their inheritance, they would find an empty shell. They would find a house stripped of value and a bank account with 0 balance. Leo came down the stairs dragging the heavy toolbox. He looked at the open safe, his mouth slightly open. "Is that pirate treasure, Grandpa?" he asked. "It is freedom, Leo," I said, zipping up the first bag. "It is the power to make sure nobody ever hurts us again." I hauled the bags up the stairs. I called Alistair again. "Phase 1 is complete," I told him. "They think I am dying. They confessed on a hot mic. I heard everything, Alistair. They mentioned the loan shark Rico. I know Rico." Alistair said, his voice cold. "He runs the betting ring in South Atlanta. Nasty piece of work. Buy the debt, Alistair. Call him today. Offer him 60 cents on the dollar for Terrence's note. Tell him you represent an interested party who wants to assume the risk. Rico will take the cash and run." "And once we own the debt," Alistair asked. "Then we own Terrence," I said. I hung up. I looked around the house one last time. I was not going to wait here for 2 days. I had to set the stage for their return. I went to the thermostat and turned the heat up to 90 degrees. I wanted the house to smell. I wanted them to walk into a wall of rot and decay. I went to the fridge and took out the milk and the raw chicken, leaving them on the counter. It was a petty touch, but I wanted their homecoming to be as unpleasant as possible. Then I took my own security system out of the box I had bought. I spent the next hour installing micro cameras in every room, in the vents, in the light fixtures, behind the mirrors. Courtney wanted to watch me. Fine. Now I was going to watch them. I was going to record every second of their panic when they realized I wasn't dead. I was going to capture every lie they told the police, every accusation they threw at each other. When I was finished, the house was wired like a federal prison. I grabbed the duffel bags. I grabbed Leo's hand. "We are going to the hospital now," I told him. "The hospital?" Leo asked, confused. "But you are not sick." "No," I said, smiling grimly. "But a dead man needs a deathbed. And I have a private suite at St. Jude's waiting for us. It is time to die, Leo, so that I can be born again as their worst nightmare." We walked out into the humid Atlanta afternoon. The sun was setting, casting long red shadows across the lawn. It looked like blood. It was fitting. I locked the door. I hid the key under the mat just where Courtney expected it to be. Let them come home, I thought. Let them come home to the hell they created. I sat in the armchair facing the front door with my hands resting on the head of my cane. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath before a scream. Leo was in the kitchen pretending to look for a snack, but I knew he was watching the driveway through the side window. We did not have to wait long. Just as the sun began to dip below the tree line, a beat-up sedan pulled into the driveway. It was not a car that belonged in this neighborhood. A woman stepped out. She was wearing blue medical scrubs that looked 2 sizes too small and carried a large tote bag. She did not look like any nurse I had ever seen at the clinic. She looked like the kind of trouble you find in the back alleys of East Atlanta at 3 in the morning. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, impatient sound. I waited a few seconds, letting her stand there in the heat, let her sweat. Finally, I shuffled to the door, dragging my left leg as if the poison was already taking hold. I opened it just a crack. "Mr. Banks," she asked. Her voice was like gravel in a blender. She didn't wait for an answer. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and stepped inside, bringing the smell of stale cigarette smoke and cheap vanilla perfume with her. "I am Hattie. Your daughter-in-law Courtney sent me. She said you were feeling under the weather and might need some help with your meds." I looked at her eyes. They were hard and flat, like a shark's eyes. There was no compassion there, no medical concern. She scanned the room quickly, assessing the layout, checking for witnesses. She saw an old man leaning on a cane and a quiet boy standing in the kitchen doorway. She dismissed us both instantly. That was her first mistake. "Courtney is very thoughtful," I rasped, making my voice sound thin and weak. "But I do not need a nurse. I just need to rest." Hattie closed the door behind her and engaged the deadbolt. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed in the foyer. "She insisted," Hattie said, dropping her bag on the sofa. "She paid me in advance to make sure you take your evening supplement. She said you can be stubborn." She reached into her bag. She did not pull out a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff. She pulled out a pre-filled syringe and a small vial of clear liquid. I recognized the label on the vial immediately. "Insulin, Humalog. I do not have diabetes," I said, straightening up just a fraction. "Why do you have insulin?" Hattie smiled, but it was just a baring of yellow teeth. "It is a vitamin blend, Pops, good for the heart. Now sit down and roll up your sleeve. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." She took a step toward me. She was a big woman with heavy arms and a center of gravity that suggested she knew how to throw her weight around. She wasn't here to nurse me back to health. She was the closer. Courtney must have realized the antifreeze might take too long or be too messy. An overdose of insulin in a non-diabetic would cause hypoglycemia, coma, death, and it would look like a metabolic crash in an old man. I took a step back, feigning fear. "I do not want it," I said. "Please leave. I am not leaving until that tube is empty," Hattie said. Her voice dropped low and menacing. "Sit down, old man. Do not make me hurt you in front of the kid." She lunged. It was not a medical approach, it was a tackle. She reached for my arm with one hand and raised the needle with the other. I stumbled back toward the kitchen. Leo was there. He was holding a bottle of vegetable oil. He had taken the cap off. He looked at me, and his eyes were wide but steady. Hattie followed me into the kitchen. The linoleum floor was shining under the overhead lights. "Grab him, kid," she barked at Leo. "Hold his arm or you are next." Leo moved, but he did not move toward me. He stepped forward and squeezed the bottle with both hands, sending a thick stream of yellow oil shooting across the floor right in Hattie's path. "What the hell?" she shouted. She tried to stop, but her momentum was too great. Her heavy rubber-soled shoe hit the slick of oil. Her legs went out from under her like she was on ice. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Physics is a cruel mistress. Hattie's feet flew up and her back hit the floor with a bone-jarring thud. Her head cracked against the lower cabinets. The syringe flew from her hand and skittered under the refrigerator. She groaned, trying to roll over, but the oil made it impossible to get traction. She was like a turtle on its back. That was my cue. I dropped the cane. I did not need it. The trembling old man vanished. In his place stood Jeremiah Banks, the man who had broken up union brawls on the docks in the 80s, the man who had once held a thief off the edge of a loading bay with one hand. I stepped over the oil, moving with a grace that belied my 70 years. I knelt on Hattie's chest, pinning her arms with my knees. She gasped, her eyes bulging as the air left her lungs. "Who are you?" I growled, my face inches from hers. "Get off me, you crazy old bat!" she wheezed, struggling to free her hands. I grabbed her wrist and twisted. I used a joint lock I had learned 40 years ago. She screamed. "Who sent you?" "Courtney," she screamed. "Courtney sent me. She said you were dying anyway. She said to speed it up. Let me go." I tightened the lock. "Not yet. Leo, bring me the zip ties from the drawer." Leo ran to the junk drawer. He came back with a bundle of heavy-duty industrial cable ties. I had them in every room. You never know when you need to secure something. Or someone. I flipped Hattie onto her stomach. She thrashed, but she was disoriented from the blow to her head, and I had leverage. I pulled her wrists behind her back and cinched the plastic tie tight. I did the same to her ankles. She was trussed up like a holiday turkey on my kitchen floor. I stood up, breathing hard. My heart was racing, but it was a good rhythm. The rhythm of a fight. "Is she dead?" Grandpa Leo asked, looking down at the woman. "No," I said. "She is just sleeping now." Hattie had passed out from the pain or the shock. It didn't matter. I had a problem. I had a hit woman in my kitchen and a daughter-in-law waiting for a death certificate. "We have to move her," I said. "Grab her feet, Leo." We dragged her across the oil-slick floor and into the hallway. She was heavy dead weight, but adrenaline gave me the strength of 10 men. We reached the door to the basement. Most people thought it was just a storage area for old holiday decorations and dusty boxes. Terrence certainly did. He never went down there because it was damp and smelled of mildew. But Terrence never looked closely at the back wall behind the wine rack. I walked down the wooden stairs, flipping the light switch. The single bulb illuminated a concrete room filled with shadows. I dragged Hattie to the far corner. I pushed aside a heavy wooden shelf filled with cheap wine bottles. Behind it was a steel door painted to look like concrete. It had a digital keypad. I punched in the code. The door hissed open. This was the panic room, the vault, the heart of my empire. The air inside was cool and dry, completely different from the rest of the basement. The walls were reinforced steel. There was a ventilation system independent of the house. Along the walls were shelves stacked with metal boxes. Inside those boxes were gold bars, deeds to land cash reserves, and the ledgers of every favor I was owed in this city. I dragged Hattie inside. I propped her up against a support beam and used another zip tie to secure her to it. She wasn't going anywhere. I stepped back and looked at her. She was a loose end, but for now she was contained. I patted her pockets. I found a cell phone, a pack of cigarettes, and a switchblade. I took them all. We stepped out of the vault and I closed the heavy steel door. I spun the lock. She was buried alive, essentially. Soundproof, escape-proof. She would have water from the emergency supply I kept in there, but she would have a long time to think about her life choices. We went back upstairs. I looked at Hattie's phone. It was locked, but I grabbed her thumb before I dragged her downstairs and unlocked it, adding my own face to the ID just in case. There were unread messages. The name on the screen was simply, Payday. "Is it done yet?" the text read. I knew that was Courtney. She was impatient. I typed a reply, my fingers moving slowly over the cracked screen. It was messy. He fought the meds. But he is down. Breathing is shallow. Looks like a deep coma. Should be over by tomorrow. I hit send. The reply came, 3 bubbles popping up instantly. Good. Make sure he stays down. Do not call 911 no matter what happens. If he wakes up, fix it. I stared at the screen. Fix it. That was her euphemism for murder. She was ordering a hit from a buffet line on a cruise ship. I typed one last thing. Understood. Cleaning up now. Will update when flatline. I put the phone in my pocket. The deception was complete. Courtney thought she had won. She thought I was lying on the floor gasping my last breath while her hired hand cleaned up the evidence. She would relax now. She would let her guard down. I looked at Leo. He was holding the bottle of oil, looking at the mess in the kitchen. "We made a mess, Grandpa," he said. "We did." I agreed. "But it is a good mess, Leo. It is the mess of survival." I grabbed the mop. We cleaned the floor again, erasing the oil, erasing the scuff marks from Hattie's shoes. We worked in silence, a team of 2 against the world. When we were done, the kitchen looked normal. The house was quiet. But beneath our feet, in a room no one knew existed, a killer was waking up to the realization that she had walked into a lion's den. I went to my bedroom and packed the rest of my things. I took the hard drive from my computer. I took the files from my desk. I was scrubbing my existence from this house. "We are leaving now, Leo," I said. We walked out to the truck. I had one more stop to make before we went to the hospital. I needed to see Alistair. I needed to sign over temporary power of attorney, not to my family, but to my lawyer. I needed to make sure that if anything happened to me, if Hattie had a partner, if Courtney came back early, my assets were locked down tighter than Fort Knox. As I drove away from the house, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For years, I had been playing the role of the tired old man. I had dimmed my light to let Terrence shine. I had made myself small so they would feel big. No more. The beast was awake, and he was hungry for justice. I looked at Leo in the passenger seat. He was looking out the window, watching the trees blur by. "You did good today, son," I said. "You saved my life." "You saved mine first, Grandpa," he replied without looking away. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. We were going to be okay. But Terrence and Courtney were about to walk into a storm they could not weather. I touched the phone in my pocket, feeling the weight of the evidence. I pulled into the parking lot of Alistair's office building. It was a glass tower in downtown Atlanta. I didn't look like I belonged there in my work boots and flannel shirt. But I owned the building. That was the thing about power. It didn't need to wear a suit. "Let's go, Leo," I said. Time to set the trap. St. Jude Hospital was one of the finest private medical facilities in Atlanta. The lobby was marble, the nurses wore crisp uniforms that looked tailored, and the air smelled of expensive flowers rather than disinfectant. Most people saw it as a sanctuary for the wealthy elite. I saw it as a line item on my quarterly investment reports. I owned 30% of the stock and sat on the board of directors under a holding company name. That was the advantage of moving in silence. You could own the ground people walked on and they would never look down to check the deed. Alistair had arranged everything. The entire fourth floor, usually reserved for high-profile cardiac patients, was cleared. We told the staff it was a security protocol for a VIP patient, which wasn't a lie. I was the VIP. I lay in the center of a suite that was larger than my living room back home. My body was connected to a spiderweb of wires and tubes. There was a ventilator hissing rhythmically beside me, the plastic tube taped to my mouth but not actually inserted down my trachea. Monitors beeped with a steady, slow rhythm, simulating a heart barely holding on. It was a masterpiece of stagecraft. Leo was safe in the adjoining room watching cartoons with the volume off, guarded by two of Alistair's private security detail. I had told him to stay hidden no matter what he heard. He promised me he would. That boy had more discipline at 9 than his father had at 35. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. Shallow. Irregular. I had to look like a man whose organs were shutting down. The makeup I had applied earlier was touched up by a professional mortician Alistair knew, making my skin look translucent and waxy. I looked like death warmed over. Alistair stood by the window, checking his watch. "They just landed," he said. "They took a helicopter from the airport. They are spending money they do not have yet." "Let them come," I rasped. "Let them see what they bought." Alistair nodded and stepped out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. He would play the role of the concerned family attorney. I was alone with the beeping machines. I lay there in the dim light, listening to the hum of the air conditioning and thinking about the man I used to be. I thought about the days carrying crates on my back, the nights sleeping in my truck to save rent money. I did it all for Terrence. I built this empire of concrete and steel so he would never have to sweat the way I did. And now he was rushing to my bedside, not to hold my hand, but to pry it open and take what he felt he was owed. 20 minutes later, I heard the commotion in the hallway. The elevator doors dinged and the sound of hurried footsteps echoed on the tile. "Where is he?" I heard Courtney's voice. It was shrill-pitched high to simulate panic, but I could hear the undercurrent of excitement. "Where is my father-in-law?" "Right this way, Mrs. Banks." Alistair said, his voice grave. "Please prepare yourself. It is not a good sight." The door burst open. I did not move a muscle. I did not twitch. I kept my eyes closed, my chest rising and falling in the shallow rhythm of the dying. Daddy, Courtney wailed. She threw herself onto my chest. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I stayed limp. She smelled of coconut sunscreen and stale airplane air. She was sobbing loud, wet sounds that vibrated against my ribs. "Oh God, Terrence, look at him. He is so pale." Terrence shuffled into the room. I could feel his presence. He smelled of nervous sweat and duty-free alcohol. He stood at the foot of the bed. "Is he conscious?" Terrence asked. His voice was trembling, but not with grief. It was fear. "No," Alistair answered from the doorway. "He has been unresponsive since the ambulance brought him in. The doctors say the toxins caused massive organ failure. His kidneys are gone. His liver is shutting down. It is only the machines keeping him here now." Courtney buried her face in my neck, pretending to cry. But while her shoulders shook with fake sobs, I felt her hands moving. She was patting down the front of my hospital gown. She was sliding her hands under the sheets, checking the pockets of the pants I was still wearing underneath. She was looking for the keys. She knew I kept the key to the wall safe on a chain around my neck or in my pocket. Her fingers were frantic, searching like spider legs. She found nothing. I had given everything to Alistair hours ago. She pulled back slightly, wiping her dry eyes. "Where are his clothes?" she snapped at Alistair, dropping the grieving act for a split second. "We need his personal effects." "Everything has been secured, Mrs. Banks," Alistair said smoothly. "Hospital policy." Courtney looked back at me. Her face was inches from mine. I could feel her hot breath on my skin. No one was looking at her hands. Her body blocked Alistair's view. She reached under the sheet and found the soft flesh of my upper arm. She pinched me. It was not a gentle squeeze. She dug her manicured nails into my skin and twisted hard. It was a vicious, cruel test. She wanted to see if I would flinch. She wanted to make sure the coma was real before she proceeded. The pain was sharp and white-hot. It took every ounce of my willpower not to slap her across the face. I forced my body to remain dead weight. I did not gasp. I did not pull away. I let her hurt me. She held the pinch for 5 long seconds before releasing. "He is really gone," she whispered to Terrence. She sounded relieved. She sounded happy. "See, I told you it would work," she muttered so low only I could hear. Terrence walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at me. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the weight of his stare. "What happens now?" Terrence asked. "Now we wait for him to die," Alistair said. "The The doctors say it could be hours, maybe a day. We cannot wait a day, Courtney said, straightening up and smoothing her dress. We have things to handle. Terrence, call the insurance company. I need to call the bank. We need to get that power of attorney filed before he flatlines or the accounts will freeze. She looked at me one last time with pure disgust. You stubborn old goat, she hissed. You finally did something useful. She turned to Alistair. I need to make some calls. Is there a private room I can use? I am just too distraught to do this in the hallway. Of course, Alistair said. Use the office down the hall. Terrence, do you want to go with her? No, Terrence said. I will stay here, with Dad. Courtney rolled her eyes. Fine, don't be long. We have a schedule. She clicked out of the room, her heels striking the floor with purpose. Alistair gave me a silent signal, knowing I couldn't see it, but sensing I was listening, and followed her out, closing the heavy door behind him. The room went quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator and the beep of the heart monitor. I was alone with my son. This was the moment I had dreaded. This was the moment I feared more than the poison. I wanted him to prove me wrong. I wanted him to fall to his knees and confess. I wanted him to call the police. I wanted him to scream for a doctor to save me. A part of me, the father part, was still hoping for a miracle. Terrence pulled a chair up to the bedside. The legs scraped against the floor. He sat down heavily. He took my hand. His palm was clammy. He squeezed my fingers. Dad, he whispered. I waited. Dad, I am so sorry. My heart leaped. He was sorry. He was going to stop this. I didn't want it to be like this. Terrence continued, his voice cracking. I really didn't. I told her we should just ask you again. I told her you would help if you knew how bad it was. Go on, son, I thought. Say you called 911. Say you are going to turn her in. But she was right, Dad. Terrence said, and the hope in my chest died a violent death. You would never understand. You are so hard. You are so perfect. You never made a mistake in your life. You look at me like I am a disappointment every day. He let go of my hand and stood up, pacing the small space beside the bed. I owe them $500,000, Dad. $500,000. Rico said he would put me in a wheelchair. He said he would hurt Leo. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, I screamed in my mind. You could have come to me. I would have paid it. I would have burned Rico's operation to the ground for you. But you chose to kill me instead. Terrence stopped pacing and leaned over the bed railing close to my face. I could smell the fear on him. You had a good run, Dad, he whispered. You are 70. You lived your life. I am just starting mine. I need this. I need the house. I need the insurance. It is the only way out for me. He reached out and smoothed the hair back from my forehead. It was a gesture of affection that felt like a violation. Just go, Dad. Just let go. It is better this way. You die thinking it was natural. I get a fresh start. Courtney stopped screaming at me. Everyone wins. Everyone wins. He looked at my dying body, my gray face, the tubes keeping me alive, and he saw a win. He saw a solution to his gambling debts. He did not see a father, he saw a liquidation sale. I lay there frozen in my fake coma, and I felt something snap inside me. It was the last tether, the last thin thread of unconditional love that binds a parent to a child. It severed. He was not my son anymore. He was a stranger who owed me a life. Terrence sighed, wiping a tear from his cheek. He probably thought he was crying for me, but I knew he was crying for himself. He was crying because he felt guilty, but not guilty enough to stop. He was the worst kind of coward, the kind who pulls the trigger and then cries over the body. I have to go, Dad, Terrence said, straightening up. Courtney is waiting. I love you. Goodbye. He turned and walked out of the room. He didn't look back. The door clicked shut. I opened my eyes. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots. 1, 2, 3. I sat up. I ripped the tape off my face and pulled the ventilator tube away. I tore the sensors off my chest. The monitor flatlined, letting out a long, high-pitched whine until I reached over and silenced it. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My arm throbbed where Courtney had pinched me. My heart ached where Terrence had stabbed it, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the parking lot. I saw them walking toward their rental car. Courtney was gesturing wildly, probably complaining about the delay. Terrence was following her, head down, shoulders slumped. They thought they had just said goodbye to a dying man. They thought they were leaving a corpse behind to rot. They were wrong. I went to the adjoining room. Leo was sitting on the floor with his headphones on. He looked up when I entered. "Did they leave?" he asked. "Yes," I said, buttoning my shirt. "Is Dad okay?" he asked, his voice small. I looked at my grandson. He was the only Banks man worth saving. "Your dad made his choice, Leo," I said. "And now I have to make mine." I picked up the phone on the desk and dialed Alistair. Jeremiah Alistair answered. "Let them file the papers," I said, my voice cold as the grave I was supposed to be in. "Let them go to court. Let them stand in front of a judge and lie," understood Jeremiah. And then I said, checking my reflection in the mirror, "I am going to rise from the dead and bury them both." I hung up. The mourning period was over. The execution was about to begin. The courthouse clock had barely struck 9 in the morning when Courtney filed the emergency petition. They did not even wait for my body to cool. In fact, they did not even wait for me to die. They were so desperate to get their hands on my money that they were petitioning the court for emergency guardianship over my estate while I was supposedly lying in a coma at St. Jude Hospital. Alistair sat with me in my private suite watching the digital feed from the courtroom. We had arranged for a private viewing through a favor Alistair was owed by the court clerk. I sat in a leather chair dressed in the suit I planned to wear to my own resurrection, drinking real coffee, while I watched my son and his wife try to bury me alive legally. The document they filed was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed that I, Jeremiah Banks, had suffered a catastrophic neurological event. It claimed that I was in a persistent vegetative state with no hope of recovery, but the most interesting part was the reason for the urgency. They claimed that my estate was hemorrhaging money and that immediate liquidation of assets was necessary to pay for my life support. They wanted to sell the house. But here was the joke that they did not understand. They thought they were selling a 3-bedroom brick house in a gentrifying neighborhood. They thought they would get maybe $400,000 or $500,000 for it, enough to pay off Rico and buy a few nice purses. They did not know that the house sat on 3 acres of prime industrial zoning land. They did not know that I had bought the surrounding lots years ago under shell companies. They did not know that the land they were trying to sell for pennies was actually the central hub for a logistics network worth millions. Their greed was only matched by their ignorance. They were trying to sell a diamond for the price of glass because they were too stupid to turn on the light and look at it. I watched on the screen as they entered the courtroom. They were dressed for the part. Courtney wore a modest black dress and flats. She wore no jewelry. She had even washed off her heavy makeup, leaving her face pale and drawn. She looked like a grieving daughter holding it together for the sake of her family. Terrence walked beside her in a dark suit that was slightly too big for him. He looked small. He looked terrified. He should be. They approached the bench. The judge was an older white man named Judge Vance. He was known for being fair, but he was also known for wanting to clear his docket quickly. He looked at the paperwork over his reading glasses. "This is a tragic situation," Judge Vance said, his voice echoing slightly on the audio feed. "Mrs. Banks, you are claiming that your father-in-law has no living will and no designated power of attorney. That is correct, Your Honor," Courtney said, her voice trembling just the right amount. "Dad was always very private. He did not like to talk about death. We tried to get him to sign papers last year, but he was just so stubborn. And now it is too late." She wiped a fake tear from her eye. "It was a performance worthy of an award." "And you have medical documentation?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Courtney said, handing over a thick manila envelope. "These are the preliminary reports from his home care nurse and the attending physician. They show massive organ failure and loss of brain function. He is gone, Your Honor. His body just does not know it yet." I leaned forward in my chair. Those were the fake documents Hattie had forged before I locked her in my wine cellar. They looked authentic. They had the right letterheads, the right medical jargon. Hattie might have been a thug, but she knew her paperwork. The judge leafed through them. He frowned. "It says here he was administered insulin. Was he diabetic?" "No," Courtney said quickly. "That is the tragedy. We believe he may have taken the wrong medication in his confusion. He has been getting so forgetful lately, leaving the stove on, forgetting our names. We tried to get him help, but he refused." I clenched my fist. She was painting me as senile. She was rewriting my history to justify her crime. She was telling the court that I was a confused old man who accidentally killed himself so that she could step in as the savior. The judge nodded slowly. "It seems straightforward enough. You are the only living relatives." "Yes, sir," Terrence spoke up. His voice cracked. It is just me and my wife, and our son Leo. We just want to make sure Dad gets the best care possible in his final days. But the medical bills are already piling up. We need to access his savings to keep the machines on. That was the hook. They were using my own life as leverage. Give us the money or we pull the plug. It was monstrous. I am inclined to grant the emergency guardianship, Judge Vance said, reaching for his stamp. Under the circumstances, it seems in the best interest of the patient to have his family manage his affairs. Courtney let out a breath she had been holding. I could see the triumph in her eyes. She was seconds away from owning everything. She was seconds away from winning. Then the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The sound was loud enough to make Terrence jump. Alistair Wright walked in. He did not walk like a man entering a courtroom. He walked like a gladiator entering an arena. He was wearing a three-piece charcoal suit that cost more than Terrence's car. He carried a leather briefcase in one hand and he did not look at the gallery. He walked straight down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. "Objection, Your Honor," Alistair boomed. His voice was a deep baritone that commanded immediate silence. Judge Vance looked up over his glasses, annoyed. "Who are you and why are you interrupting my court?" "I am Alistair Wright," Alistair said, stopping at the gate. "I am the personal attorney for Mr. Jeremiah Banks, and I am here to object to this petition on the grounds that it is based on fraudulent evidence, malicious intent, and a conspiracy to commit murder." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Courtney spun around in her chair. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. "Who is this?" she hissed at Terrence. "I don't know," Terrence whispered back. "Dad didn't have a lawyer. Dad used LegalZoom. Mr. Wright," Judge Vance said, setting his pen down. "Those are serious accusations. Do you have standing here?" "I do," Alistair said, opening the gate and walking to the defense table. He set his briefcase down with a heavy thud. "I have a power of attorney signed by Jeremiah Banks dated yesterday. It supersedes any claim these two individuals might have. Yesterday," Courtney blurted out, standing up. "That is impossible. He was in a coma yesterday. He was dying." "Sit down," Mrs. Banks, the judge barked. Alistair turned to look at her. He smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. Mr. Banks was lucid enough to recognize that he was surrounded by wolves, Mrs. Banks, and he was lucid enough to hire a hunter. "Your Honor, this man is lying," Courtney shrieked, her composure cracking. "We have never seen him before. My father-in-law is a retired dock worker. He does not have a high-powered attorney. This is some kind of scam." "The only scam here is the one you are running," Alistair replied calmly. "Your Honor, before we even address the medical condition of my client or the validity of these forged documents, I have a more pressing matter." "What matter is that?" Judge Vance asked, leaning forward. Alistair looked at Terrence and then at Courtney. He looked at them with pure disgust. "The matter of Leo Banks," Alistair said. Courtney blinked. "My son. What does Leo have to do with this?" "Everything," Alistair said. "You are petitioning for guardianship of Mr. Banks's estate based on your status as his family. You claim to have his best interests at heart. You claim to be responsible caregivers." "We are," Courtney said. "Then why?" Alistair asked, his voice rising slightly. "Why is your 9-year-old son currently in the protective custody of my firm, terrified to go home to his own parents?" Terrence stood up. "You have Leo. Where is he?" "He is safe," Alistair said, "which is more than I can say for his grandfather." "Your Honor," Courtney said, turning to the judge, her eyes wide and manic. "This man kidnapped my child. Arrest him." "Mr. Wright," the judge said, his face darkening. "If you have the child, you better have a good explanation." "I do," Alistair said. "I have a witness who was in the house when Mr. Banks allegedly took the wrong medication, a witness who saw everything, a witness who wants to petition the court to strip these two people of their parental rights immediately before we even discuss the estate." "A witness?" Courtney laughed, a high-pitched, nervous sound. "Who?" "The dog." "No," Alistair said. "Leo Banks." Courtney stopped laughing. She looked at Terrence. Then she looked back at Alistair, and a sneer curled her lip. "Leo," she said dismissively. "You want to put Leo on the stand? Good luck with that. The boy is mute. He has been mute since birth. He is retarded. He has the mental capacity of a toddler. He cannot testify. He cannot even tie his shoes." "Are you sure about that?" Mrs. Banks, Alistair asked, unlocking his briefcase. I am his mother, Courtney spat. I think I know my own son. He is useless as a witness. He cannot speak. He cannot write. He is a vegetable just like his grandfather is about to be. Alistair looked at the judge. Your Honor, I request permission to bring the witness in. I believe the court will find that Leo Banks has a lot to say. The judge looked at Courtney's smug face and then at Alistair's calm demeanor. He was curious. Bring him in, the judge ordered. Alistair nodded to the bailiff, who opened the side door. I watched on the screen, my heart swelling with pride. Leo walked in. He was wearing a small suit I had bought him online months ago for Easter, which we never celebrated. He looked small in the big courtroom, but he walked with his head high. He walked past his parents. He did not look at them. He walked straight to the witness stand. Courtney was shaking her head, smirking. This is a waste of time, she whispered to Terrence, loud enough for the mic to pick up. Watch him drool on the microphone. Leo climbed into the chair. His feet dangled above the floor. The bailiff held out the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Leo placed his small hand on the book. He looked at the judge. He looked at Alistair. And then for the first time, he looked at Courtney. His eyes were cold. They were the eyes of a Banks man. I do, Leo said. His voice rang out clear as a bell in the silent courtroom. Courtney gasped. She grabbed the table for support. Her face went slack with shock. Terrence dropped his head into his hands. The judge's eyebrows shot up. State your name for the record, young man. My name is Leo Banks, the boy said into the microphone, and I am not mute. I never was. I just stopped talking because she said she would cut my tongue out if I told Grandpa what she was doing. He pointed a finger straight at Courtney. She plotted it, he said. She mixed the poison, and my dad watched. The courtroom erupted. The courtroom doors swung open with a heavy thud that seemed to echo the beating of my own heart. I leaned closer to the monitor in my hospital suite, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and terror. My grandson Leo walked into the room. He looked incredibly small amidst the towering mahogany benches and the high ceilings of the Hall of Justice. He was wearing the little navy blue suit I had bought him for Easter, a holiday we never got to celebrate because Courtney had claimed he was having an episode. He clutched a worn plastic Superman action figure in his left hand, his knuckles white against the red cape of the toy. He did not look at the gallery where spectators were murmuring. He did not look at the judge, who peered down with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He walked straight down the aisle, his eyes fixed on the witness stand. As he passed the defense table, Courtney leaned toward Terrence. She did not bother to lower her voice. Her arrogance was a shield she thought was impenetrable. Look at him, she scoffed, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. He is shaking. He is going to wet himself right there on the stand. This is a circus, Terrence. That lawyer is desperate. He is putting a mute retard on the stand to garner sympathy. He does not know anything. He cannot even tie his own shoes, let alone testify. Terrence did not respond. He was staring at his son with a look I could not quite place. Was it shame? Was it fear? Or was it the first dawning realization that he did not know his own child at all? Leo climbed into the witness chair. It was too big for him. His feet dangled inches above the floor, swinging slightly. He placed the Superman toy on the ledge in front of him, carefully standing it up so it faced the courtroom. The bailiff approached, holding out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? The bailiff asked, his voice bored and routine. Courtney let out a loud, dramatic sigh. Your Honor, this is ridiculous, she interrupted, standing up. My son is nonverbal. He has been diagnosed with severe developmental delays. He does not understand the oath. He does not even understand where he is. This man, she pointed an accusing finger at Alistair, is exploiting a disabled child for a legal stunt. It is abuse, Your Honor. Sit down, Mrs. Banks. Judge Vance barked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Mr. Wright has assured the court that the witness is competent. I will make that determination myself. Courtney sat down, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes at Terrence. She looked like a woman waiting in line at the DMV, annoyed but certain that she would eventually get her way. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had already crumbled away. The judge turned his attention to Leo, softening his expression. Young man, can you hear me? Leo nodded once. Can you state your name for the record? The judge asked. The courtroom fell silent. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks. Everyone was waiting for the silence to continue. They were waiting for Alistair to step in and interpret. They were waiting for Leo to make a noise or a gesture. Instead, Leo leaned forward toward the microphone. He took a deep breath. My name is Leo Banks." The words were not slurred. They were not halting. They were crystal clear, ringing through the courtroom speakers with a bell-like quality that stunned every single person in the room. Courtney gasped. It was a wet, ragged sound like she had been punched in the gut. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes bulged. She stared at Leo as if he had just grown a second head. Terrence jumped in his seat, knocking his water glass over. The water spread across the defense table, but he did not even notice. "Order," the judge shouted, banging his gavel as the gallery erupted in whispers. Leo sat calmly through the chaos. He looked strong. He looked like me. The judge stared at Leo, his mouth slightly open. "You can speak?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Leo answered. "I have always been able to speak. I can read too, and I can write. I am in the 4th grade level for math, but my mom does not know that because she never checks my homework." Courtney was shaking her head violently back and forth. "No," she whispered loud enough for the mic to catch. "No, that is impossible. He is sick. The doctors said he is sick, Mr. Wright." Alistair stepped forward, his voice smooth and commanding. "Leo, can you tell the court why you pretended to be mute for so long? Can you tell us why you let your mother believe you could not speak?" Leo turned his head slowly. He looked directly at Courtney. For the first time, I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the courage that conquered it. "Because she said she would hurt me," Leo said, his voice trembling slightly. "When I was 4, I heard her talking on the phone. She was saying bad things about Grandpa. I asked her why she was being mean. She got very mad. She took me into the kitchen. She opened the drawer and took out the big scissors, the ones used to cut chicken bones." The courtroom was frozen. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. She held them open. Leo continued, a tear rolling down his cheek. "She told me that little boys who talk too much lose their tongues. She said if I ever told Grandpa or Dad what she said or what she did, she would cut my tongue out. She said it would hurt a lot, and I would never be able to eat ice cream again. So I stopped talking. I thought if I didn't talk, she wouldn't use the scissors." "Oh my God!" someone in the back of the courtroom cried out. "You little liar!" Courtney shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her face was red, contorted with rage. "That is a lie. I never did that. You are making this up. Who told you to say that? Was it him? Was it the lawyer? Mrs. Banks, if you do not sit down, I will hold you in contempt," the judge roared. Leo did not flinch at her screaming. He was used to it. He just looked at the judge. "She calls Grandpa a monkey," Leo said softly. "She says he is dirty. She hits me when Dad is at work. She says I am a half-breed mistake." Terrence turned to look at his wife. His face was gray. "You did what he whispered. You threatened him with scissors." "Shut up," Terrence Courtney hissed. "He is lying. Can't you see he is lying?" I watched on the monitor, my fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to be there. I wanted to tear her apart myself. But Leo was doing it better. He was destroying her with the truth. Mr. Wright, Alistair said again, guiding the testimony. "Leo, did you hear anything specific regarding your grandfather in the days leading up to his hospitalization?" "Yes," Leo said. "Last week, Mom and Dad were in the car. They thought I was asleep in the back seat, but I wasn't. Mom was angry because Grandpa wouldn't sell the house." "And what did she say?" Alistair asked. "She said she was tired of waiting," Leo said. "She said there was a way to speed it up." Objection. Courtney's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, stood up. "Hearsay, Your Honor. This is the testimony of a child against his mother. There is no proof." "I have proof," Leo said. He reached for the Superman toy on the ledge. He picked it up. It was an old toy, a cheap plastic figure with a button on the back that was supposed to make Superman say catchphrases, but I had modified it. I had replaced the voice chip with a high-fidelity digital recorder weeks ago when I first suspected they were plotting. I had given it to Leo and told him to press the button whenever he felt scared. "I call this my listening toy," Leo said. "Grandpa fixed it for me. He told me that Superman has super hearing. He told me to use it to catch the bad guys." Courtney went pale. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She knew. She remembered the toy. She had probably laughed at him for playing with it while she plotted murder right in front of him. Leo pressed the button on the back of the figure. The audio was tinny, but it was loud enough to be heard clearly in the hush of the courtroom. The voice was unmistakably Courtney's. You need to buy the colorless kind, Terrence, the kind that does not smell. Antifreeze is sweet. He likes sweet tea. He won't even notice. Then Terrence's voice weaker, scared but complicit. What if the autopsy shows poison? It won't. Courtney's voice snapped back on the recording. He is old. His kidneys are failing anyway. It will look like natural causes. Just get the stuff. Once the old man is dead, we get the insurance money. $2 million, Terrence. And the land. We sell it all. The recording continued. There was a pause, and then Courtney spoke again. Her voice on the tape was cold, devoid of humanity. And what about the kid, Terrence asked. What about Leo? Courtney laughed on the tape. It was a chilling sound. Once we have the money, we put him in a state home. I am not raising a mute retard in Paris. We dump him in an orphanage and start over. We can have a real baby, a normal one. Leo pressed the button again and the recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, crushing. It was the sound of a coffin lid slamming shut. Terrence let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting the defense table with a thud. He covered his head with his arms curling into himself, trying to hide from the voice on the tape, trying to hide from the monster he had married, trying to hide from the monster he had become. Courtney stood there, swaying slightly. She looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for an exit, looking for anyone who would believe her. But there was no one. The jury looked at her with pure revulsion. The judge looked at her with fury. Even her own lawyer had taken a step away from her, creating a physical distance between himself and the radioactive toxicity of his client. It is a fake, she whispered, but her voice had no power. It is AI. It is a deep fake. Mrs. Banks, the judge, said, his voice dangerously low. Sit down. Now. Bailiff, take Mrs. Banks into custody immediately. Wait, Leo said. He wasn't done. He looked at his father, the broken man weeping on the table. Dad, Leo said. Dad, look at me. Terrence slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, swollen ruins. He looked at his son. You let her, Leo said. You stood there and you let her mix it. You watched her give it to Grandpa. You watched Buster die. You didn't say anything. Terrence opened his mouth, but no words came out, just a dry heave of shame. I hate you, Leo said simply. That was the final blow. It hit harder than the gavel. It hit harder than the prison sentence that was surely coming. Terrence collapsed completely, sliding out of his chair and onto the floor under the table, sobbing uncontrollably, begging for forgiveness that would never come. Courtney was screaming now as the bailiffs moved in to cuff her. She was screaming that it was a setup, that I was behind it all, that she was the victim. But no one was listening. They were all looking at the small boy in the oversized suit holding a Superman toy like it was the sword of justice. I watched from my suite, tears streaming down my own face. He had done it. My grandson. He had saved us both. Now it was my turn. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my tie. Opened the door, I told the security guard. It is time for the dead to rise. The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they flew wide as if kicked by the hand of God himself. The sound reverberated off the high ceilings, silencing the chaos that Leo's testimony had unleashed. Every head turned, every breath was held. The bailiffs who were moving toward Courtney froze in their tracks. I stepped across the threshold. I was not the shriveled gray husk of a man they had left to rot in a hospital bed at St. Jude. I was not the confused pensioner shuffling around in slippers and a bathrobe. I was not the victim. I was wearing a suit I hadn't put on in 5 years. It was bespoke charcoal Italian wool cut to fit the broad shoulders that had carried the weight of an empire for 4 decades. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine, clicking rhythmically against the marble floor with the cadence of a military march. I did not need a cane. I stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, my back straight, my head high. I walked with the easy power of a man who owns the building he is standing in. The gallery parted for me like the Red Sea. I saw neighbors who had come to gawk expecting a funeral service. I saw the court clerks, their mouths hanging open. But my eyes were fixed on the defense table. Courtney looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her nails were turning white. She tried to speak, but only a strangled squeak came out. She was looking at a dead man walking, and for the first time in her miserable life she realized she was the one in the coffin. Terrence was still under the table, but he peeked out like a rat sensing a trap. When he saw me, he scrambled backward, knocking over a chair. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Dad, you are alive." I ignored him. I walked straight to the gate, pushing it open without breaking stride. I stopped in front of the judge's bench. "Your Honor," I said, my voice deep and steady, filling the room without the need for a microphone. "I apologize for the theatrics, but as you can see, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Also, reports of my mental incompetence seem to be somewhat premature." Judge Vance looked at me, then at the medical files on his desk, then back at me. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mr. Banks, I presume," the judge said. "The one and only," I replied. "And I am here to reclaim my life, my grandson, and my dignity." Courtney finally found her voice. It was a shriek, a desperate clawing sound. "This is a trick. He is an imposter. My father-in-law is dying. He is in a coma. This is just some actor that lawyer hired." I turned to look at her slowly. I let the silence stretch out, letting her squirm in it. "Hello, Courtney," I said. "Did you enjoy the cruise? I hear the buffet is to die for." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "You," she hissed. "You were dying. I checked. I pinched you." "You pinched a man who has had steel beams dropped on his arm," I said. "You pinched a man who has been shot at on the docks of New Orleans. You think your little fingernails scare me. You have no idea what pain is, Courtney. But do not worry. You are about to learn." I turned back to the judge in the gallery. It was time to drop the curtain. It was time to show them exactly who they had tried to kill. "You see, Your Honor, these two people believe I am a poor retired dock worker living off a union pension. They believe my house is my only asset. They believe they had to kill me to get a few $100,000 to pay off their gambling debts and fund their vanity." I paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with the jury members. But they were wrong. I am not just a retired worker. My name is Jeremiah Banks, and I am the founder and sole proprietor of Banks Logistics. A murmur went through the crowd. Banks Logistics was a name everyone in Atlanta knew. It was on the side of the 18-wheelers that clogged the interstates. It was on the massive warehouses near the airport. It was a brand synonymous with shipping freight and massive amounts of capital. Courtney's jaw dropped. Her eyes went wide, scanning my face, searching for the lie, but finding only the hard truth. "I own the largest freight shipping network on the East Coast," I continued. "I own 3 million square feet of commercial real estate. I own the building my son's favorite nightclub is in. I own the land his private school was built on. I have a net worth that these two could not count if they had 100 years. Courtney let out a sound like a balloon deflating. She slumped into her chair. She had been living on a mountain of gold, and she had tried to kill the dragon for a handful of copper coins. The realization was crushing her. She had treated me like a burden, like a peasant, when all along I could have bought and sold her entire existence with pocket change. "Why," she whispered, "why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted to see if you were worth it," I said coldly. "I wanted to see if my son could build a life on his own. I wanted to see if you loved him, or if you were just a parasite looking for a host. And when I saw you mistreating my grandson, when I saw you looking down your nose at me, I knew. I knew you didn't deserve a dime, so I kept it hidden. I kept it safe." I walked over to the defense table, looming over them. "You killed my dog for a house that is worth less than one of my trucks," I said. "You poisoned your own soul for pennies." Terrence was weeping openly now. "Dad, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If I knew you had money, I would never have listened to her. That is the problem, son," I said, my voice filled with disgust. "You would have loved me for the money. You would have been a good son for a paycheck. And that is not love. That is prostitution." Alistair stepped forward, then placing a thick stack of documents on the table in front of Terrence. The sound of the paper hitting the wood was heavy, like a judge's gavel. "We are not done," Mr. Wright announced. "We have addressed the attempted murder. We have addressed the fraud. But there is still the matter of your debts." Terrence looked at the papers. His eyes widened in recognition. "Rico," he whispered. "Yes, Rico," Alistair said. "Mr. Banks here instructed me to contact your creditor this morning. We had a very interesting conversation. It turns out Rico is a businessman. He understands risk. And when we offered to buy your debt for 60 cents on the dollar in cash immediately, he was very happy to sell." Terrence looked up at me, his face pale. "You bought my debt. I own you," I said, leaning in close. "Every penny you borrowed. every bet you placed, every marker you signed. It all belongs to me now. $500,000, Terrence. Plus interest. But you are my dad, Terrence stammered. You just said you have millions. You can just forgive it, right? You can wipe it clean. I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that made Leo jump slightly in the witness box. Forgive it, I asked incredulously. You tried to kill me, Terrence. You watched your wife mix antifreeze into my tea. You watched my dog die and you stepped over his body to go on a cruise. And you think because I have money, I am going to give you a free pass. I pointed a finger at his chest. I am not your father right now. I am your creditor. And I am much worse than Rico. Rico would have just broken your legs. I am going to break your life. I turned to the judge. Your Honor, my firm has already filed liens against every asset these two possess. We have frozen their bank accounts. We have seized their cars. We are filing for immediate foreclosure on their rental property as Mr. Banks was the guarantor on their lease and he has revoked that guarantee. They have nothing, Courtney screamed, standing up again. You can't take everything. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, I said, cutting her off. And I suggest you use it because you are going to need to save your breath for prison. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! Mrs. Banks, sit down. But I wasn't finished. I had one more blow to deliver. I looked at Courtney. You wanted to be rich. You wanted the high life. Well, here is the reality. You are destitute. You are going to prison for attempted murder. And when you get out, if you ever get out, you will still owe me. I will garnish every paycheck you ever earn. I will take every dime you find in the street. I will be the shadow over your life until the day you die. Courtney looked at me, and for the first time I saw the arrogance completely vanish. It was replaced by the hollow, empty look of someone who has lost everything. She looked at her designer purse on the table, the one she had bought with my stolen credit card, and she realized it was the last nice thing she would ever own. Terrence grabbed my sleeve. Dad, please, I will work it off. I will do anything. Just don't let them take me to jail. I pulled my arm away as if his touch burned. You will work it off, I agreed, but not as a free man. You will work in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour, and every cent of that will come to me. I turned my back on them. I walked over to the witness stand where Leo was watching with wide eyes. I held out my hand. Come on, Leo. We are done here. Leo hopped down from the chair. He took my hand. He looked back at his parents. They were broken, sobbing ruins of people. Bye, Mom, Leo said. Courtney looked up, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. Leo, baby, tell them. Tell them I love you. Leo squeezed my hand. No, you don't, he said. You only love money. And now you don't have any. We walked toward the exit. Behind us, the bailiffs were moving in handcuffs, clicking as they secured the prisoners. The judge was reading charges into the record. The gallery was buzzing with the shock of the revelation. But I didn't hear any of it. All I heard was the sound of my grandson's breathing and the steady beat of my own heart, still alive, still strong, still fighting. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled fresh. It smelled like justice. I had my life back. I had my grandson, and I had a business to run. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I pulled my phone out and called the office. Get the trucks ready, I told my foreman. The boss is back, and we have a lot of work to do. The courtroom doors swung open with a heavy thud that seemed to echo the beating of my own heart. I leaned closer to the monitor in my hospital suite, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of pride and terror. My grandson Leo walked into the room. He looked incredibly small amidst the towering mahogany benches and the high ceilings of the Hall of Justice. He was wearing the little navy blue suit I had bought him for Easter, a holiday we never got to celebrate because Courtney had claimed he was having an episode. He clutched a worn plastic Superman action figure in his left hand, his knuckles white against the red cape of the toy. He did not look at the gallery where spectators were murmuring. He did not look at the judge, who peered down with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He walked straight down the aisle, his eyes fixed on the witness stand. As he passed the defense table, Courtney leaned toward Terrence. She did not bother to lower her voice. Her arrogance was a shield she thought was impenetrable. Look at him. She scoffed, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. He is shaking. He is going to wet himself right there on the stand. This is a circus, Terrence. That lawyer is desperate. He is putting a mute retard on the stand to garner sympathy. He does not know anything. He cannot even tie his own shoes, let alone testify. Terrence did not respond. He was staring at his son with a look I could not quite place. Was it shame? Was it fear? Or was it the first dawning realization that he did not know his own child at all? Leo climbed into the witness chair. It was too big for him. His feet dangled inches above the floor, swinging slightly. He placed the Superman toy on the ledge in front of him, carefully standing it up so it faced the courtroom. The bailiff approached, holding out a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "So help you God?" the bailiff asked, his voice bored and routine. Courtney let out a loud, dramatic sigh. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous," she interrupted, standing up. "My son is nonverbal. He has been diagnosed with severe developmental delays. He does not understand the oath. He does not even understand where he is. This man," she pointed an accusing finger at Alistair, "is exploiting a disabled child for a legal stunt. It is abuse, Your Honor. Sit down, Mrs. Banks." Judge Vance barked, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Mr. Wright has assured the court that the witness is competent. I will make that determination myself." Courtney sat down, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes at Terrence. She looked like a woman waiting in line at the DMV, annoyed but certain that she would eventually get her way. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet had already crumbled away. The judge turned his attention to Leo, softening his expression. "Young man, can you hear me?" Leo nodded once. "Can you state your name for the record?" the judge asked. The courtroom fell silent. It was the kind of silence that happens right before a storm breaks. Everyone was waiting for the silence to continue. They were waiting for Alistair to step in and interpret. They were waiting for Leo to make a noise or a gesture. Instead, Leo leaned forward toward the microphone. He took a deep breath. "My name is Leo Banks." The words were not slurred. They were not halting. They were crystal clear, ringing through the courtroom speakers with a bell-like quality that stunned every single person in the room. Courtney gasped. It was a wet, ragged sound, like she had been punched in the gut. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes bulged. She stared at Leo as if he had just grown a second head. Terrence jumped in his seat, knocking his water glass over. The water spread across the defense table, but he did not even notice. "Order," the judge shouted, banging his gavel as the gallery erupted in whispers. Leo sat calmly through the chaos. He looked strong. He looked like me. The judge stared at Leo, his mouth slightly open. "You can speak?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Leo answered. "I have always been able to speak. I can read too, and I can write. I am in the 4th grade level for math, but my mom does not know that because she never checks my homework." Courtney was shaking her head violently back and forth. "No," she whispered loud enough for the mic to catch. "No, that is impossible. He is sick. The doctors said he is sick." Mr. Wright, Alistair stepped forward, his voice smooth and commanding. "Leo, can you tell the court why you pretended to be mute for so long? Can you tell us why you let your mother believe you could not speak?" Leo turned his head slowly. He looked directly at Courtney. For the first time I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the courage that conquered it. "Because she said she would hurt me," Leo said, his voice trembling slightly. "When I was 4, I heard her talking on the phone. She was saying bad things about Grandpa. I asked her why she was being mean. She got very mad. She took me into the kitchen. She opened the drawer and took out the big scissors, the ones used to cut chicken bones." The courtroom was frozen. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. She held them open. Leo continued, a tear rolling down his cheek. "She told me that little boys who talk too much lose their tongues. She said if I ever told Grandpa or Dad what she said, or what she did, she would cut my tongue out. She said it would hurt a lot and I would never be able to eat ice cream again. So I stopped talking. I thought if I didn't talk, she wouldn't use the scissors." "Oh my God," someone in the back of the courtroom cried out. "You little liar!" Courtney shrieked, jumping to her feet. Her face was red, contorted with rage. "That is a lie. I never did that. You are making this up. Who told you to say that? Was it him? Was it the lawyer? Mrs. Banks, if you do not sit down, I will hold you in contempt," the judge roared. Leo did not flinch at her screaming. He was used to it. He just looked at the judge. "She calls Grandpa a monkey," Leo said softly. "She says he is dirty. She hits me when Dad is at work. She says I am a half-breed mistake." Terrence turned to look at his wife. His face was gray. "You did what he whispered. You threatened him with scissors." "Shut up," Terrence, Courtney hissed. "He is lying. Can't you see he is lying?" I watched on the monitor, my fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. I wanted to be there. I wanted to tear her apart myself. But Leo was doing it better. He was destroying her with the truth. Mr. Wright Alastair said, again guiding the testimony, "Leo, did you hear anything specific regarding your grandfather in the days leading up to his hospitalization?" "Yes," Leo said. "Last week Mom and Dad were in the car. They thought I was asleep in the back seat, but I wasn't. Mom was angry because Grandpa wouldn't sell the house." "And what did she say?" Alistair asked. "She said she was tired of waiting," Leo said. "She said there was a way to speed it up." Objection. Courtney's lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, stood up. "Hearsay, Your Honor. This is the testimony of a child against his mother. There is no proof." "I have proof," Leo said. He reached for the Superman toy on the ledge. He picked it up. It was an old toy, a cheap plastic figure with a button on the back that was supposed to make Superman say catchphrases. But I had modified it. I had replaced the voice chip with a high-fidelity digital recorder weeks ago when I first suspected they were plotting. I had given it to Leo and told him to press the button whenever he felt scared. "I call this my listening toy," Leo said. "Grandpa fixed it for me. He told me that Superman has super hearing. He told me to use it to catch the bad guys." Courtney went pale. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. She knew. She remembered the toy. She had probably laughed at him for playing with it while she plotted murder right in front of him. Leo pressed the button on the back of the figure. The audio was tinny, but it was loud enough to be heard clearly in the hush of the courtroom. The voice was unmistakably Courtney's. "You need to buy the colorless kind, Terrence, the kind that does not smell. Antifreeze is sweet. He likes sweet tea. He won't even notice." Then Terrence's voice, weaker, scared but complicit. "What if the autopsy shows poison?" "It won't." Courtney's voice snapped back on the recording. "He is old. His kidneys are failing anyway. It will look like natural causes. Just get the stuff. Once the old man is dead, we get the insurance money. $2 million, Terrence. And the land. We sell it all." The recording continued. There was a pause, and then Courtney spoke again. Her voice on the tape was cold, devoid of humanity. "And what about the kid?" Terrence asked. "What about Leo?" Courtney laughed on the tape. It was a chilling sound. "Once we have the money, we put him in a state home. I am not raising a mute retard in Paris. We dump him in an orphanage and start over. We can have a real baby. A normal one." Leo pressed the button again and the recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, crushing. It was the sound of a coffin lid slamming shut. Terrence let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting the defense table with a thud. He covered his head with his arms, curling into himself, trying to hide from the voice on the tape, trying to hide from the monster he had married, trying to hide from the monster he had become. Courtney stood there, swaying slightly. She looked around the room, looking for an ally, looking for an exit, looking for anyone who would believe her. But there was no one. The jury looked at her with pure revulsion. The judge looked at her with fury. Even her own lawyer had taken a step away from her, creating a physical distance between himself and the radioactive toxicity of his client. "It is a fake," she whispered, but her voice had no power. "It is AI. It is a deep fake." "Mrs. Banks," the judge said, his voice dangerously low. "Sit down, now. Bailiff, take Mrs. Banks into custody immediately." "Wait," Leo said. He wasn't done. He looked at his father, the broken man weeping on the table. "Dad," Leo said. "Dad, look at me." Terrence slowly lifted his head. His eyes were red, swollen ruins. He looked at his son. "You let her," Leo said. "You stood there and you let her mix it. You watched her give it to Grandpa. You watched Buster die. You didn't say anything." Terrence opened his mouth, but no words came out. Just a dry heave of shame. "I hate you," Leo said simply. That was the final blow. It hit harder than the gavel. It hit harder than the prison sentence that was surely coming. Terrence collapsed, completely sliding out of his chair and onto the floor under the table, sobbing uncontrollably, begging for forgiveness that would never come. Courtney was screaming now as the bailiffs moved in to cuff her. She was screaming that it was a setup, that I was behind it all, that she was the victim. But no one was listening. They were all looking at the small boy in the oversized suit holding a Superman toy like it was the sword of justice. I watched from my suite, tears streaming down my own face. He had done it. My grandson. He had saved us both. Now it was my turn. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my tie. Open the door, I told the security guard. It is time for the dead to rise. The holding room at the back of the courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, but mostly it smelled of desperation. I stood by the reinforced window looking out at the parking lot where my fleet of trucks was idling. They were massive steel beasts bearing my name, Banks Logistics, painted in bold blue letters on the side. For 40 years, I had looked at those trucks with pride. Today, they just looked like heavy machinery waiting to crush something. Behind me, the door clicked open. A bailiff escorted Terrence into the room and then stepped back, leaving us alone. My son looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His expensive suit, the one I had paid for, was rumpled and stained with sweat. His tie hung loose around his neck like a noose he had failed to tighten properly. His eyes were red-rimmed and darting around the room looking for an exit that did not exist. He stood there for a moment, swaying slightly on his feet. Then he collapsed. It wasn't a faint. It was a surrender. He fell to his knees and scrambled across the linoleum floor toward me. He wrapped his arms around my legs, burying his face in the fabric of my trousers. He was sobbing loud, wet sounds that echoed off the cinder block walls. "Dad," he wailed. "Oh God, Dad, I am so sorry. Please, you have to help me. You have to tell them to stop." I looked down at him. I felt the weight of his body against my legs. I remembered when he was 5 years old and he had fallen off his bike. He had clung to my leg just like this, crying for me to make the pain go away. Back then, I had picked him up, wiped his tears, and bought him ice cream. I had fixed it. But you cannot fix a broken soul with ice cream. "Get up, Terrence," I said. My voice was low and flat, devoid of the warmth he was seeking. He didn't move. He just tightened his grip. "She made me do it, Dad," he blubbered into my pant leg. "Courtney, she is crazy. You saw the video. You heard the recording. She threatened me. She said she would take Leo. She said she would tell Rico where I lived. I was scared, Dad. I was a victim too. She manipulated me." I reached down and grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. I am an old man, but I have hands that have stacked crates and hauled steel for half a century. I hauled him up to his feet and shoved him backward. He stumbled and fell into a metal chair which scraped loudly against the floor. "Do not lie to me," I roared. Terrence shrank back, holding his hands up as if to ward off a blow. "I am not lying," he squeaked. "You are a liar and a coward," I said, stepping closer to him. "You say she manipulated you. You say you were a victim. Let us look at the facts, Terrence." I began to count them off on my fingers, each one a hammer blow to his excuses. 1. You were in the car when she proposed buying the poison. You didn't argue. You didn't call the police. You asked if it would show up in an autopsy. You were not worried about my life. You were worried about getting caught. Terrence opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. 2. You stood in my living room and watched her brew that tea. You watched her pour the antifreeze. You watched her carry it to me. You stood right there, Terrence. You looked me in the eye and said goodbye while I held a cup of death in my hand. I leaned in close so he could smell the coffee on my breath, so he could see the veins pulsing in my forehead. 3. When the dog died. When Buster drank that spill and convulsed on the floor, you didn't run back inside. You didn't call 911. You got in an Uber and went to the airport. You stepped over the body of the dog you grew up with and you went on a cruise. Terrence was shaking his head, tears flying from his face. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do, I spat. You knew how to sign the papers. That is number 4. You signed the Do Not Resuscitate order. You signed the cremation authorization. You signed the emergency guardianship petition. Your hand didn't shake when you were signing away my life and my legacy. It only shakes now because you got caught. I turned away from him, walking to the other side of the small room. I couldn't look at him. It made me sick. You are not a victim, Terrence, I said quietly. A victim is someone who has something done to them. You were an active participant. You were the lookout, the getaway driver, and the beneficiary. You are an accomplice to attempted patricide. But I am your son, he whispered. Doesn't that mean anything? It means everything, I said, turning back to face him. It means that your betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. If a stranger tried to kill me, it would be business. But you, I changed your diapers. I paid for your college. I bought your house. I gave you everything I never had, and your gratitude was a shallow grave. Dad, please, Terrence begged. I will go to counseling. I will change. Just don't let them send me to prison. I will die in there. You know I will. Rico has guys inside. They will kill me. I looked at him. He was right. He was soft. He was weak. Prison would chew him up and spit him out, and while a part of me wanted him to suffer, I did not want him dead. Death was too easy. Death was an escape. I wanted him to live. I wanted him to remember. I am not sending you to prison, I said. Terrence slumped in the chair, relief washing over his face. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Dad. I knew you would forgive me. I knew it. I didn't say I forgave you, I interrupted him. And I didn't say you were going free. Terrence froze. What do you mean? I walked over to the table where Alistair had left a duffel bag. I unzipped it. Inside, there were no stacks of cash, no gold bars. There was a pile of clothes. I reached in and pulled out a uniform. It was a heavy blue cotton jumpsuit with reflective strips on the arms and legs. It was the uniform of a floor worker at Banks Logistics. On the breast pocket, there was a patch. It said trainee. I threw the jumpsuit at him. It hit him in the chest and slid into his lap. Put it on, I said. Terrence looked down at the rough fabric. What is this? That is your new life, I said. I pulled out a clipboard from the bag. I have made a deal with the district attorney. Because of your cooperation in testifying against Courtney, and because I am the victim and I requested leniency, they are going to suspend your sentence. You will get 5 years of probation. Terrence smiled weakly. Probation. I can do probation. I can go back to my old job in sales. I can start paying you back. No, I said. You are not going back to sales. You are fired from your old life. You are evicted from your house. I have already seized your car, your electronics, and your designer clothes. You have nothing, Terrence. The clothes on your back belong to the state. The shoes on your feet are mine. I pointed at the jumpsuit. You owe me $500,000 plus interest, plus the legal fees, plus the cost of the dog you helped kill. You are going to pay me back every single dime. But how? Terrence asked, his voice rising in panic. It will take me a lifetime to pay that back working a normal job. Exactly, I said. You are going to work for me. You are going to report to Warehouse 4 at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. You will start at the bottom, loading docks, sorting crates, sweeping floors. You will earn minimum wage. I will garnish 75% of your wages to pay your debt. The rest will go to room and board. Room and board, Terrence asked. I bought a small efficiency apartment near the warehouse district, I said. It has a bed, a stove, and a toilet. It is safe. It is clean. And it is yours. No internet, no cable, just a roof over your head so you can rest enough to work the next day. Terrence looked at the jumpsuit with horror. Dad, you can't be serious. I am not a laborer. I have a degree. I have soft hands. Then you better buy some gloves, I said coldly. Because if you miss a shift, if you are late once, if I catch you gambling even for a penny, I will revoke your probation and send you to prison myself. I leaned over the table, my face inches from his. You wanted my money, Terrence. You wanted the fruits of my labor without the sweat. Well, now you are going to taste the sweat. You are going to feel every ache in your back that I felt building this company. You are going to understand exactly what it takes to earn $1. Terrence stood up, letting the jumpsuit fall to the floor. I won't do it. This is slavery. I would rather go to jail. I picked up the phone on the wall. Bailiff, I called out. The defendant is rejecting the plea deal. Please prepare him for transport to the state penitentiary. Wait! Terrence screamed, diving for the phone and slamming it down. Wait! Don't! He looked at me, his eyes wild. He looked at the door where the bailiff was waiting. He looked at the jumpsuit on the floor. He realized he had no leverage. He had no power. He was a child again, but this time there was no ice cream to fix the pain. He slowly bent down and picked up the blue uniform. His hands were shaking. Fine, he whispered. I will do it. Good, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single $20 bill. I placed it on the table. This is for steel toe boots, I said. Buy used ones. You cannot afford new. I turned and walked toward the door. Dad, Terrence called out, "How long? How long do I have to do this?" I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. I did a quick calculation in my head. At minimum wage with garnishment and interest. "About 40 years, I said. I opened the door. "See you at work, son. Don't be late." I walked out, leaving him holding the uniform of the man he thought he was too good to be. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing his fate. He wasn't going to prison, but he was going to a place much harder for a man like him. He was going to reality, and for the first time in his life, he was going to have to pay his own way. The courthouse was quiet when Judge Vance signed the final decree. There was no fanfare, no screaming, no drama. It was just the sound of a pen scratching on paper. But that sound was the sound of a chain breaking. Terrence had surrendered his parental rights as part of his plea deal, a final act of cowardice disguised as mercy. Courtney had been stripped of hers by the state after being declared an unfit mother due to the abuse and the attempted murder charges. I, Jeremiah Banks, was now the sole legal guardian of Leo Banks. We walked out of the family court building hand in hand. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the chaos of the criminal trial. The sun was shining, but the air had a bite to it, the first hint of autumn in Atlanta. Leo was quiet. He had been quiet since the day in court when he testified. He had used his voice to save us, but now that the danger was gone, he seemed to retreat back into the silence that had been his armor for so long. "Are you hungry?" I asked him as we reached my truck. He shook his head. "Do you want to go to the park?" He shrugged. I knelt down on the sidewalk, ignoring the ache in my knees. I looked him in the eye. "Leo," I said, "it is over. They cannot hurt you anymore. You do not have to be quiet. You do not have to be afraid. You are safe." Leo looked at me. His lower lip trembled, his eyes filled with tears. And then, for the first time in his life, he let go. He did not speak. He wailed. It was a guttural, raw sound of pure grief. He threw his arms around my neck and sobbed into my shoulder. He cried for the years of silence. He cried for the mother who hated him. He cried for the father who failed him. I held him right there on the sidewalk while people walked by and stared. I let him cry until he had nothing left. I stroked his hair and whispered promises I intended to keep. "We are going home," I told him when he finally quieted down. "But not to that house. We are going to our real home." I drove us out of the city, past the suburbs, past the warehouses, past the life I had shown the world. We drove north into the rolling hills where the trees were old and the air was clean. We turned onto a private road marked by a simple stone gate. Leo looked out the window, his eyes red and puffy. "Where are we going, Grandpa?" "To the place I built for you," I said. The driveway wound through the woods for a mile before opening up into a clearing. And there it was, the estate I had bought 10 years ago under a blind trust. It was a sprawling stone mansion with large windows overlooking a private lake. There were stables, a greenhouse, and acres of green grass. I had bought it thinking that one day I would retire here with my wife, but she died before it was finished. Then I thought I would bring Terrence here when he matured, but he never did, so it had sat empty waiting for the right heir. Leo's mouth dropped open. "Who lives here?" "We do," I said. I parked the truck in front of the massive oak doors. I unlocked them and led Leo inside. The foyer was grand with a staircase that curved up to the second floor. The floors were polished marble. The light streamed in through the skylights. "This is big," Leo whispered. "It is big enough for a boy to find his voice," I said. I took him to the east wing. I had prepared a room for him. It was not just a bedroom, it was a sanctuary. One wall was entirely shelves filled with books. Another wall was a giant chalkboard for drawing. There was a telescope by the window and a desk with a computer that could run NASA simulations. "This is your room, Leo," I said. "You can paint it any color you want. You can fill it with whatever you want. And you never have to hide in here. This is your kingdom." Leo walked over to the desk. He touched the smooth wood. "Is Mom coming here?" he asked, his voice small. "No," I said firmly. "She will never set foot on this property. The security system here is better than the one at the White House." "You are untouchable, Leo." He looked at me and nodded. "Okay, Grandpa." Over the next few months, we settled into a rhythm. It was not easy. The trauma of what he had endured ran deep. He still flinched at loud noises. He still checked the locks on the doors 3 times before bed. But slowly, the boy I knew was in there began to emerge. I hired the best, not just teachers, but healers. Dr. Eris, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma, came to the house 3 times a week. She did not force Leo to talk. She played chess with him. She walked with him by the lake, and slowly she helped him unpack the years of abuse he had stored in his heart. I also hired tutors. I did not send him back to the public school where he had been labeled as slow. I brought in experts, a math professor from tech, a language tutor who taught him French and Mandarin, a coding expert who showed him how to build his own software. And that is when I discovered the true extent of his genius. Leo was not just smart. He was brilliant. The silence had given him a gift. He observed. He saw patterns that other people missed. He understood systems. One evening I was sitting in my study going over the quarterly reports for Banks Logistics. I was frowning at a spreadsheet trying to figure out why shipping costs from the Savannah port had spiked by 12%. Leo walked in. He was holding a book on supply chain management that I had left on the coffee table. "Grandpa," he said, pointing at the screen, "it is the fuel surcharge." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The fuel surcharge," Leo said, tapping the paper. "You are using a fixed-rate contract with the carriers, but the market price of diesel dropped last month. You are overpaying by 14 cents a mile. If you switch to a floating rate index, you will save $300,000 this quarter." I stared at him. He was 10 years old. "How do you know that?" I asked. "I read the contracts on your desk," Leo said, shrugging. "And I checked the fuel index online. It is simple math." I looked back at the spreadsheet. I did the math. He was right. I sat back in my chair. I looked at my grandson, really looked at him. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, holding a glass of milk, but in his eyes I saw the same fire I had when I was young. The fire to build, the fire to understand how the world worked. "Do you like this stuff, Leo?" I asked. "Business. It is like a puzzle," Leo said. "Everything fits together. If you move one piece, everything else moves. It makes sense. People don't always make sense, Grandpa, but numbers do." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had felt in a long time. "Come here, son," I said. "Pull up a chair." That night we did not read bedtime stories. We went over the profit and loss statements for the entire company. Leo asked questions that made me sweat. He pointed out inefficiencies in our routing. He suggested automating the inventory tracking in Warehouse 3. By midnight I realized something. I had not just saved my grandson. I had found my successor. Terrence had never cared about the business. He only cared about the money it produced. He saw the company as a magic ATM. But Leo saw the machine itself. He saw the gears and the levers. He respected it. The next day I took Leo to the headquarters. I did not introduce him as a child. I introduced him as an intern. "This is Leo," I told my executives. "He is going to be shadowing me. Answer his questions. Show him everything. And do not treat him like a kid. Treat him like a Banks." Some of them smirked. Some of them rolled their eyes. But after the first meeting where Leo corrected the CFO on a depreciation calculation, the smirks vanished. He soaked it up like a sponge. He learned how to negotiate. He learned how to read people. He learned that in business your word is your bond, but you always get it in writing. One afternoon we were driving back to the estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Grandpa Leo said, looking out the window, "Yes, Leo. Why did Dad do it? Why did he want to hurt you?" I thought about lying. I thought about protecting him. But we had promised no more secrets. "Because he was weak, Leo," I said. "He wanted the easy way out. He thought he deserved what I had built without doing the work. He let greed poison him. Will I be like him?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road. I turned off the engine. I turned to face him. "No," I said fiercely. "You will never be like him. You have something he never had." "What is that?" "You know what it feels like to have nothing," I said. "You know what it feels like to be voiceless, to be powerless. That memory will keep you humble, Leo. It will keep you hungry. And it will keep you honest. Your father thought the world owed him. You know that you have to earn your place in it." Leo nodded slowly. "I am going to make the company bigger, Grandpa," he said. "I am going to make it the best in the world." "I believe you," I said. "And I am going to take care of you," he added, "when you are really old. I won't let anyone give you bad tea." I laughed a deep belly laugh that shook the cab. I know you won't, son. I started the truck back up. As we drove home, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had lost a son, but I had gained a legacy. The empire was safe, the future was bright, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about what would happen when I was gone, because I knew that Leo Banks was ready to take the wheel. It had been exactly 1 year since the gavel fell and sealed Courtney's fate. Life at the estate had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Leo was thriving. He was learning to ride horses. He was coding his own video games. The shadows under his eyes had disappeared, replaced by the light of a boy who knew he was loved. But I knew better than to think a snake stops biting just because you put it in a cage. Snakes wait. They coil in the dark and look for a crack in the glass. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, mixed in with the business correspondence at my office. It did not have a return address, just a stamp from the state penitentiary. The handwriting was jagged and desperate, scrawled in pencil on cheap yellow legal paper. I didn't need to look at the signature to know who it was. The venom seeped through the paper. Jeremiah, the letter read, "Do not think you have won. You think you are untouchable in your big house, but I know secrets. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the union deals in the 90s. I am going to talk. I have found a journalist who is interested in the real story of Banks Logistics. Unless you deposit $500,000 into the account listed below, I am going to burn your legacy to the ground. I have friends on the outside. Watch your back, old man." I read the letter twice. Then I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She was bluffing. My offshore accounts were perfectly legal tax shelters set up by the best accountants in the world. The union deals were ancient history and ironclad. But the threat was real. She was trying to reach out from behind bars to hurt me, to hurt Leo. She mentioned friends on the outside. That was the part that made me sit up straight. A desperate woman with nothing to lose is dangerous. If she managed to scrape together enough money or favors to hire a hitman, even a cheap one, my grandson could be in danger. I picked up the phone and called Alistair. "She is reaching out," I told him. "I know," Alistair replied. "We intercepted a call she made to a known associate of Rico's yesterday. She is trying to put a contract out on you, Jeremiah. She is offering a percentage of your estate as payment." "So she hasn't learned," I said, feeling the cold anger rising in my chest again. "Some people don't learn," Alistair said. "They just rot." "What do you want to do? Do you want me to file harassment charges?" "No," I said, standing up and walking to the window overlooking the warehouse floor. "Filing charges takes too long. It gives her a platform. It gives her a voice. I want to take her voice away." "How?" Alistair asked. "I supply the food, Alistair," I said. "Banks Logistics has the contract for the entire state prison system. We deliver every loaf of bread, every carton of milk, every pound of meat that goes into that facility." I heard Alistair pause. I could practically hear his smile through the phone. "I forgot about that," he said. "You handle the legal side," I said. "I am going to handle the supply chain." I hung up the phone. I grabbed my coat. I wasn't going to the courthouse this time. I was going to the prison. It was time to remind my daughter-in-law who exactly paid for the roof over her head, even the one with bars on the windows. The drive to the women's correctional facility took 2 hours. It was a bleak gray complex, surrounded by razor wire and watchtowers. To most people, it looked like a fortress. To me, it looked like just another delivery drop-off point. I didn't go to the visitors center. I went to the warden's office. Warden Miller was a man I had known for 20 years. We played golf occasionally. He knew that if my truck stopped rolling, his inmates stopped eating. That kind of leverage buys a lot of goodwill. "Jeremiah," Warden Miller said, shaking my hand. "To what do I owe the honor?" "You usually send a rep for the contract renewals." "This is personal, Frank," I said, sitting down. "Inmate number 7492, Courtney Banks." The warden sighed. "Ah, your daughter-in-law. She is a problem, Jeremiah, always complaining, always trying to stir up trouble with the other inmates. She thinks she runs the block. She is trying to put a hit out on me, Frank," I said. "She sent me a letter. She is making calls." The warden's face hardened. "On my watch." I handed him the letter. He read it, his frown deepening. "I can put her in solitary," he said. "I can strip her privileges." "No," I said. "Solitary is too quiet. She needs to understand her position in the food chain, literally." I leaned forward. "Frank, my company delivers the premium meals for the staff and the standard meals for the inmates. But we also handle the surplus, the stuff that is about to expire, the stuff that is legally edible but tastes like cardboard." "I understand," the warden said, nodding slowly. "From now on, Courtney gets the surplus," I said. "And I want her moved. Take her out of the minimum security wing. Put her in C block. C block. The warden raised an eyebrow. That is general population, Jeremiah. That is where the lifers are. That is where the women who killed their own kids go. Exactly, I said. Courtney tried to kill a child. My grandson. She threatened to cut his tongue out. I think she belongs with her peers. Do not you. The warden looked at the letter again. Then he looked at me. I will have the transfer orders signed within the hour. I stood up. Thank you, Frank. And one more thing. I want to see her. I was led to a private visitation room. It was a small concrete box with a thick plexiglass divider. Courtney was brought in 10 minutes later. She looked different. Her hair was dull and chopped short. Her skin was sallow. She had lost weight. But her eyes still held that spark of arrogant madness. When she saw me, she sneered. She picked up the phone. Did you bring the money, she asked? Or are you here to beg? I picked up the receiver on my side. Hello, Courtney. I got your letter. It was very creative. You think I am joking? She hissed. I know people, Jeremiah. I can make things happen. You can't even make lunch happen. Courtney, I said calmly. She blinked, confused. What? Do you like the food here? I asked. It is slop, she spat. It is about to get worse, I said. You see, Courtney, I own the distribution company that feeds this prison. Every time you open a tray from now on, I want you to remember who put it there. You eat because I allow it. You sleep on a mattress that came in on one of my trucks. You are living in my world. She stared at me, her mouth opening slightly. And I spoke to the warden, I continued. He agrees that you are in the wrong housing unit. You are too comfortable, so you are moving to C block today. Fear, true terror flashed across her face. C block. That is where the animals are. You can't put me in there. I am a white-collar criminal. You are a child abuser, I corrected her, my voice like steel. And do you know what women in prison do to child abusers? They do not like them, Courtney. They do not like them at all. I stood up. I bought your husband's debt, I said. I own his life. Now I own yours too. Every breath you take in here is a gift from me. Do not send me another letter. Do not make another call. Because if you do, I will have you moved to a facility so far away that even God won't be able to find you. I hung up the phone. Courtney was screaming now, banging on the glass. I couldn't hear her. I turned my back and walked out. As I left, I saw the guards moving in to escort her not back to her cell, but deeper into the prison, toward the heavy steel doors of C block. The transfer happened that afternoon. My influence in the prison system was not just about food. Information travels fast behind bars, especially when money greases the wheels. By the time Courtney arrived in C block with her meager possessions, every woman in that unit knew exactly who she was. They knew she had tried to poison a grandfather, but more importantly, they knew she had tortured a mute boy for years. In prison, there is a hierarchy. At the bottom, lower than the rats, are those who hurt children. Courtney tried to buy protection. She tried to use the last of her commissary credits to bribe a cellmate named Big Rhonda, a woman serving life for armed robbery. But Courtney made a mistake. She tried to talk down to Rhonda. She tried to act like she was the boss. Rhonda took the commissary items, and then she took Courtney's mattress. For 3 nights, Courtney slept on the cold concrete floor. She learned what it meant to be powerless. She learned what it meant to be silenced. Every time she tried to speak, someone would tell her to shut up. If she argued, she got shoved. But Courtney was not just mean, she was stupid. Desperation makes people do foolish things. A week later, I got a call from Alistair. She took the bait, he said. What happened? We planted a rumor, Alistair explained. We had an inmate whisper to Courtney that there was a way out. That if she could get rid of her cellmate, Big Rhonda, she could get transferred to the psych ward, which is much softer. We planted a shiv, a sharpened toothbrush, under her bunk. And she went for it, Alistair said. Last night she tried to stab Rhonda in her sleep. I closed my eyes, exhaling a long breath. She had dug her own grave. Did she succeed? I asked. No, Alistair said. Rhonda was awake. She was waiting. She broke Courtney's arm and held her down until the guards came. The whole thing was caught on the security cameras. And the weapon. Found in Courtney's hand with her fingerprints all over it. I leaned back in my chair. Attempted murder of an inmate. Assault with a deadly weapon. How much time, I asked. The district attorney is throwing the book at her, Alistair said. Since she is already serving time for a violent felony, this counts as a second strike. They are adding 10 years to her sentence, and she is being moved to permanent administrative segregation for her own protection. She will be in a 6x8 cell for 23 hours a day for the next decade. She wanted to be alone, I said. She wanted us out of her way. Now she has got her wish. She is done, Jeremiah Allister said. She is buried. Thank you, Allister, I said. I hung up the phone. It was over. The threat was neutralized. Courtney would rot in a concrete box growing old and gray with nothing but the echo of her own hate to keep her company. She would never see Leo again. She would never see the outside world again until she was an old woman too broken to hurt anyone. I walked out of my study and onto the patio. Leo was down by the lake, skipping stones. He looked happy. He looked free. I walked down to him. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, looking up. "Hey, son." He threw a stone. It skipped 3 times before sinking. "Is she gone?" Leo asked. He didn't have to say her name. "Yes," I said. "She is gone for a long, long time. She can never come back." Leo nodded. He picked up another stone. "Good," he said. We stood there watching the ripples in the water. I put my hand on his shoulder. I had protected my family. I had used my power not for greed but for defense. I had turned the tables on the people who thought I was weak. But looking at Leo, I knew that the real victory wasn't destroying Courtney or enslaving Terrence. The real victory was standing right here next to me. I saved him. And in saving him, I had saved myself. "Come on, Leo," I said. "Let's go make some tea." "Real tea?" he asked, grinning. "Real tea," I promised. "No secrets." We walked back up the hill toward the big house, the house that was finally a home, leaving the ghosts of the past buried in the dark where they belonged. 10 years is a long time in the life of a company, but it is a blink of an eye in the life of a man who is waiting to die. I am 80 years old now. The doctors say my heart is strong, but my legs finally gave up the ghost about 3 years ago. I navigate the world in a motorized wheelchair now. Some people look at me and see a frail old man. They see the white hair and the wrinkled hands and they think I am weak. They are wrong. My eyes are just as sharp as they were the day I stared down a hit woman in my kitchen. My mind is a steel trap, and from this chair I watch my legacy unfold. We were in the main conference room of the new bank's logistics headquarters in downtown Atlanta. It was a glass tower that scraped the sky, a monument to 40 years of sweat and blood. The table was made of polished mahogany long enough to seat 20 people. Around it sat the board of directors, men and women in expensive suits who controlled millions of dollars. They were powerful people. But they were all quiet. They were all listening. At the head of the table stood a young man. He was 19 years old. He wore a navy blue suit that fit him like armor. He was tall with broad shoulders and a jawline that could cut glass. He moved with a predator's grace, pacing slowly as he spoke. "This is Leo Banks." He was not looking at notes. He did not need them. He had the entire quarterly report memorized down to the last decimal point. "The expansion into the Savannah port is not a risk," he said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the room without effort. "It is an inevitability. We have the capital. We have the infrastructure. And our competitors are still using routing software from 2015. If we move now, we crush them. If we wait, we become them." He paused, looking around the table. His gaze landed on a skeptical board member, a man named Peterson, who had been doubting me since the 80s. "Do you have a question, Mr. Peterson?" Leo asked. Peterson shifted in his seat. "It is a significant investment, Leo. 200 million. "It is an investment in dominance," Leo countered. "Grandpa taught me that you do not buy a seat at the table. You buy the table. We are buying the table." I smiled from my spot in the corner. That was my line. He had learned it well. The vote was unanimous. The expansion passed. As the meeting adjourned, the board members lined up to shake Leo's hand. They treated him with a mixture of fear and reverence. They forgot he was 19. They only saw the power. They only saw the bank's name. When the room cleared, Leo walked over to me. He sat on the edge of the table, loosening his tie. "How did I do, Grandpa?" he asked. "You did good, son," I said. "You gutted them and they thanked you for the knife." Leo laughed. It was a warm sound, a sound that had taken years to cultivate. The mute boy was gone. In his place was a titan. "I have a surprise for you," Leo said. "Check the news." I pulled out my tablet. There was a headline on the local business channel. "Banks Logistics acquires rival firm for pennies on the dollar." I looked at him. "You bought out the trucking company that fired me in 1975, I asked. "Hostile takeover." Leo grinned. "I thought it would make a nice birthday present for you." "I fired the CEO this morning. I told him it was personal." I felt a lump in my throat. He remembered. He remembered every story I ever told him about the men who disrespected me, about the struggle, about the hunger. He was not just building a business, he was settling my scores. "Let's go home," I said. "I am tired of looking at suits." We took the private elevator down to the garage. My driver helped me into the back of the limousine. Leo sat beside me working on his phone, making deals, moving mountains with his thumbs. I looked out the window as we drove through the city. We passed the old warehouse district. It was still there, the beating heart of the company. It was grimy and loud, filled with the smell of diesel and sweat. It was where I started. And it was where someone else had ended. Inside Warehouse 4, the air was thick with dust, and the noise of forklifts was deafening. It was 90 degrees in the shade. In the middle of the floor, a man was directing a crew of loaders. He was 55 years old, but he looked 70. His hair was gray and thinning. His face was lined with deep grooves of exhaustion and bitterness. His back was permanently stooped from years of lifting crates that were too heavy for him. He wore a blue jumpsuit with the name Terrence stitched on the pocket. Below it was the title, Shift Foreman. It sounded like a promotion, but it was just a shackle. He was responsible for everything. If a load was late, it was his fault. If a worker got hurt, it was his fault. He worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and at the end of the month, he received a pay stub that showed his earnings and then showed the garnishment. 75%. Gone. Sent directly to the trust I had set up for Leo. Terrence wiped the sweat from his forehead with a dirty rag. He walked toward the break room, limping slightly on his bad knee. He couldn't afford the surgery to fix it. He bought his painkillers over the counter. He pushed open the door to the break room. It smelled of old coffee and microwaved fish. A group of younger workers were huddled around the small television mounted in the corner. They were watching the news. "Look at that," one of them said, pointing at the screen. "That is the young boss. Leo Banks. Man, he is sharp. They say he is going to be a billionaire before he is 21. Terrence froze. He looked up at the screen. There was Leo standing on the steps of the new headquarters giving a press conference. He looked radiant. He looked powerful. He looked like a king. "That is my son," Terrence whispered. The worker next to him laughed. "Yeah, right, Terrence. And I am the Queen of England. Your son. Look at you, man. You can't even afford a sandwich. That kid is royalty. You are just a warehouse rat like the rest of us." Terrence didn't argue. He didn't have the fight in him anymore. He just stared at the screen, his eyes filling with tears. He reached out a trembling hand as if he could touch the boy through the glass. "I am sorry," he mouthed. "Leo. I am sorry." But Leo couldn't hear him. No one could. Terrence had made himself invisible the day he decided to betray his blood. He had tried to reach out over the years. He had sent letters begging for a meeting, begging to see Leo just once. I read them all, and then I burned them. I never told Leo. I never let that poison back into his life. Terrence had lost the right to be a father when he signed those papers. He was just an employee now, a debt that was slowly being paid off. The break time buzzer sounded. Back to work, the supervisor yelled, sticking his head in the door. "Those trucks aren't going to load themselves." Terrence turned away from the TV. He turned away from the image of the son he threw away. He put his hard hat back on. He walked back out into the noise and the heat to earn another $12 that he would never see. This was his prison. It had no bars, but it was stronger than any jail cell. It was a prison of regret, and he would die in it. Back at the estate, the sun was setting over the lake. The house was quiet and peaceful. We had dinner on the terrace, steak and potatoes just the way I liked them. Leo cut my meat for me, not because I couldn't do it, but because he wanted to serve me. After dinner, we went to the study. It was my favorite room, filled with leather books and the smell of cedar. I wheeled myself over to the fireplace. Leo went to the wet bar in the corner. He boiled the water. He measured the loose leaves. He was meticulous. I watched him. I remembered another time, another tea, another sun. The memory was a scar that never fully faded. Leo walked over to me carrying a steaming porcelain cup on a saucer. He knelt down beside my chair so he was eye level with me. "Here, Grandpa," he said, offering the cup. "Chamomile and honey. Good for the digestion." I looked at the tea. It was dark and rich. It smelled sweet. I looked at Leo. His eyes were open and honest. There was no deception there. There was no greed. There was only love. I took the cup. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, but from age. "Thank you, son," I said. I lifted the cup to my lips. I took a sip. It was hot. It was sweet. It was perfect. I drank the whole thing while Leo watched me, a smile playing on his lips. "It is good," I said, handing him the empty cup. Leo stood up and placed the cup on the mantelpiece. "I am going to head to bed, Grandpa," he said. "I have an early meeting with the architects for the new distribution center. Do you need anything else?" "No, Leo," I said. "I have everything I need." He bent down and kissed me on the forehead. "Good night, Grandpa. I love you." "I love you too, Leo." He walked out of the room, turning off the main light, leaving me in the warm glow of the fireplace. I turned my wheelchair to face the large window. I could see my reflection in the glass. An old man in a big house. I looked into the camera lens that I imagined was there, the lens of history. The eyes of everyone who had ever doubted me, everyone who had ever tried to hurt me. People say blood is thicker than water. I said to the empty room, my voice low and gravelly. They say family is everything. They say you have to forgive because they are your kin. I leaned forward, my eyes narrowing. They are wrong. Blood is just biology. It is just DNA. It does not make a father. It does not make a son. Loyalty makes a family. Respect makes a family. Love that does not ask for a price tag makes a family. I thought about Terrence sleeping on a cot in a studio apartment, aching from a day of labor. I thought about Courtney rotting in a cell surrounded by women who despised her. I thought about the poison in that tea. I did not feel guilty. I did not feel remorse. "Sometimes you have to amputate a limb to save the body," I said. "Sometimes you have to cut down the rotten branch before it kills the tree." I loved my son. I loved him enough to give him life, and I loved him enough to punish him when he tried to take mine. I looked at the empty teacup on the mantel. My name is Jeremiah Banks. I started with nothing. I built an empire. I saved my grandson. And I survived my own family. I tapped the armrest of my chair. And this is how I protected my legacy. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that had seen too much. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a business to run. And unlike my son, I know the value of $1. I spun my chair around and wheeled myself toward the desk where a stack of contracts was waiting. The work never stopped, and neither did I. Fade to black. This story serves as a brutal reminder that blood makes you related, but only loyalty makes you family. I spent a lifetime building an empire for a son who saw me only as an obstacle to his inheritance, proving that greed can rot even the deepest bonds. True legacy isn't about the assets you leave behind, but the values you instill in those who actually deserve them. Sometimes the hardest thing a parent must do is cut off a rotten branch to save the whole tree. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never let your love become a license for someone else's abuse. If you believe that loyalty is thicker than blood, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below.